It all kicks off underground, deep in the city's drainage system, and right now Kamuro Naoki isn't even there. Even after he snaps to the fact that he's trapped in a whole new world, the man still charges right back into his exterminator duties. This time, he's out to clear out Mazmaskal, huge rat-like demon creatures in this world. Then, back in ours, he figures he can just treat them like normal rats and take their tails as guild-proof instead. He slices off every last tail and stuffs the leftover bodies into his bag. Naoki can't stop asking himself where to dump them, but his old plan, burning the bodies, slams into a wall because he can't do it with his fire talent. Naoki stared into the pitch-dark forest ahead, wondering if he really remembered those stories about adventurers who got slaughtered by goblins or slimes here. And yeah, he wasn't about to gamble his life by fighting anything except Mazmaskal, so he figures it's no big deal to dump the remains in the forest and let the monsters finish everything. He hurls the rats into the forest and just turns a deaf ear as monster screams erupt a few minutes later. He takes one wild second to replay his life, right up to the moment he died in his old world, then snaps his eyes open and realizes he's been dropped into a brand new one. At first, he's completely lost, but then it clicks. This world is basically the RPG Naoki used to grind. And the crazy part, the reason he's out here exterminating rats isn't random at all. He's done this exact job in his past life, so he's somehow already built for it more than anyone around him. The second Naoki steps into the Adventure Guild, it doesn't take long for the truth to hit. He's totally not built for a sword or a magic staff. While adventurers chase water monsters and heroes battle the Demon King, the big question hits them. Did some god create the heroes? The Demon King rages that if that god exists, he should have done everything differently, because he gave the heroes powers too similar to his own. And now the Demon King survives by grinding bugs and insects for a living. He hasn't even begun unraveling the secrets this world is hiding. He links up with a bunch of fired-up people, and the whole crew rockets back into the city, straight to where Naoki lives, right to the previous day. He usually heads straight to Chimera, the old elf who runs a medicine shop. The shop overflows with stacks of books and shelves packed tight with medicines, and Chimera lights up the moment Naoki shows up to wipe out the pests, absolutely loving how he works. So Naoki leans in and thanks her for the great review. Then he tells her he can handle cleaning too, and he gets busy making the whole place feel more alive and vibrant. When the job's done, Chimera pays him 50 knots, and Naoki heads out to hunt for something else to do as an exterminator. And as he passes by, most people are locked in as combat adventurers, gearing up with the armor and kit they've been dreaming of. He wishes he could snag other talents like them, but since nothing comes his way, he grits his teeth and heads back out to handle extermination jobs. Clutching hope, he set out to grab the most basic materials he could find and, with the stash he just pulled from that bundle, the currency of this world in his hands, he wastes no time and decides to finally hunt down a place to stay for the very first time. Naoki headed straight for the Adventurers Guild, and right beside it sat an even bigger, fancier inn than the one we've seen in that other world, packed with every kind of setup adventurers could want, with fighters and travelers milling around, burning through their hard-earned cash. Naoki clutched his request paper and went to clean up Chimera's house. The receptionist checked his request off as done, and Irene couldn't help but praise the amazing work he'd pulled off. Naoki decided to scan the board for anything else he could take, but most jobs were monster hunts or magical experiments, the kind that scream adventurer from a mile away, so he knew he had to find something doable, especially since he only had 50 knots, and if he burned 20 just to stay here, he'd be left with a measly 30. Then he caught adventurers yelling to Irene, asking straight up if she really meant to send them on the mission. Irene swore nobody else had ever pulled it off, and she refused to even consider the request for a long time. So every time the adventurers replied, the whole mess got worse and worse, until they basically jumped at the chance to wipe out slime since it fit their skill set, grabbed the job, and dashed off, leaving Irene stuck there, slamming out a long, defeated sigh. Naoki asked her if that request was even doable for a total beginner. Then he looked right at her. Irene ran into Naoki, and he told her the request came straight from the governor's office. If anyone wants the double-fold mess maskell, they've got to wipe it out of the sewers. They'll only pay 5 knots per head of Mazmaskell, and honestly, Mazmaskell is a nightmare to handle, fast, agile, and always slipping away. Plus they live and roam in the sewers, where magic is completely off-limits to prevent accidents. Naoki stared at that Mazmaskell and realized it wasn't some grand monster, just rays of rat extermination dressed up fancy. And Irene said the damage these rats caused could be stopped if they pushed the city to get clean. So Naoki immediately told her he'd take the job. Irene blurted out, asking if he was really sure, and when he instantly nodded yes, she thanked him right on the spot. While Naoki shrugged and said he was totally fine since he was busy hunting for a job. Irene also shot him a good luck smile, and right now, after finishing this request, Naoki's heart feels light and happy. With his homemade rat poison, he wiped out the Mazmaskell, and ever since, every rat rakes him in 5 knots, so to drop 100 rats at once, he's stacking a whopping 500 knots. He figured that if he kept taking this step, his dream of owning his own place was finally within reach. And now, he's fired up and ready to go crank out mass batches of rat poison, so he can smash even more rats later. So he hauled himself to Camira's place and demanded she sell him every poisonous plant she had in stock. Then she hit him with the price, 100 knots, and it was way too expensive for her. Naoki leaned in and asked her for a discount, then shot a glance back at where Camira had offered him a deal to come clean now and then. She'd sell it to him for 10 knots, straight up. Naoki couldn't believe her kindness, so he grabbed her hand, practically bursting with excitement, which left Camira burning with embarrassment, even as she still felt the heat of his hand. She yanked her hand away and shot him a worried look like, "Why do I look so red?" Camira brushed it off, saying it was nothing, and that she had to bolt right after finishing her work. Then Naoki paid her on the spot and made sure he had every ingredient he needed to whip up the poison bait. Then he hustled to the market and grabbed flour and honey from the grocery store. On his way, Naoki stumbled onto a shop that sold monster meat, and he hurried to the owner asking for a tiny taste of that monster's tender blood and fat, only for the stench to hit him so hard it made the whole choice feel sickening. But when he finally stumbled back to the guild, the stench hit like a weapon. Everyone recoiled and erupted into non-stop screaming and demanded he get out right then because what he was clutching stank like rotten garbage. So Naoki, shaking with fear, fought back, insisting he had to use it for his job, then chose to work right there since he didn't have a house. Irene erupted, then take it somewhere else. And when he asked if he could do it at the inn, she warned him that the foul stench would cling to the Naoki wall. She demanded to know what his problem was if he kept going, because this was a fantasy world and nothing would happen. "So why are you even trying?" she snapped, pressing him hard like she had no clue who he thought he was talking to, and then she ordered, "Do it behind the guild." Naoki went there exactly like she said, and then he dumped every last ingredient of that plant poison so it could rain down on the monster's blood and honey. He kicked off his mission by turning his first plan into a deadly poison rat. He mashed wheat dough, stirred in water and honey, then hacked up poisonous plants and kneaded them right in, before breaking the dough into dango. Then he smeared the dango with monster's blood and fat, and right after, he snatched a sniff, swearing it smelled downright fragrant. Nobody else would dare come near it, because it was built to be rat poison, and now that it's finished, the damage is exactly what you'd expect. He prayed it looked good enough to be safe, but one bite would mean death, so he slapped a skull and crossbones on it to warn everyone and stop the tragedies. Now his plan kicks into full gear. He heads into the sewer, checks the map first, and figures out exactly where to set the bait so he can follow it to the letter. He scattered poison bait everywhere, then stepped back and finally wrapped up the setup. Naoki stumbled into some random spot and crashed outside overnight. No cash left after he burned everything making that poison rat. Morning hit, and he shot up and headed straight for work, while we were right there, ready to roll. He staggered back in horror, as hundreds of huge rats sprawled dead all over the place. The bait hit dead on, and joy lit up his face. Now he just had to clean up, hauling in their tails one by one and dumping them deep in the forest. Then he hustled back to the guild for his reward, only to get a bag packed with tons of knots as a gift. And Irene practically lit up with joy, all handled fast. And Pace and Naoki would head back to the disposal channel to scrub the rest of the areas clean. The very next day, he stormed back to the same spot and found even more dead rats sprawled across the ground. Naoki ran this same move again and again, pushing it again and again until it was clear he wouldn't stop, and he wiped out just enough rats to keep the whole cycle going over and over again. But Irene snapped, telling him to stop cold, and demanded to know what he thought he was doing. Even when she called him into her office, Naoki insisted he just had to wrap up his last task before the deadline. Irene admitted she never saw this coming, and neither did the office, because the reward sounded way too high for them. He even started worrying he might go bankrupt. Then he asked how many rats he'd wiped out so far, and Irene snapped back that she quit counting once he hit 1,000, leaving him staring at the jaw-dropping amount of money he was apparently about to get. While Naoki insisted he was just doing his usual job, Irene couldn't shake the feeling that this was anything but normal for him. Then Naoki swung by the office before washing the sewer, and Intan suddenly snapped in surprise. A thunderous crash from the guild door, and yep, Naoki was the one who did it. Yanked everyone's eyes toward him because that guild gate was massive, way too strong for a beginner like Irene to think she could break it. It looked like she actually had a clue, so Irene asked Naoki to show her his adventurer card, only he barely even looked at it, forcing her to snap him back to reality. That was the card he'd gotten the day he first joined the guild. Naoki finally pulled it out and handed it over, and when Irene saw it, her hopes didn't just rise, they exploded into reality. She told Naoki that every time someone levels up, it hits them all at once, and before they even realize how strong they've become, they accidentally smash something. Still, Naoki's growth was so wild it went way too fast. He's a level 38 adventurer now, and that's straight up impossible. Naoki told her straight up that it was true. He'd thrown that dead Maz Maskell, the one that had swallowed poison, into the forest, and the monsters must have gorged on it and powered up, even though he was only level 2 a few days ago. So yeah, this is still messing with her mind. That fast growth didn't happen for a simple reason, and while it all spiraled, he slowly started to realize just how wild and fascinating this woman really was. So Irene warned her to stay silent about her leveling method, because if word spread, it would spark a massive riot across Naoki. They grilled her on whether level 38 was high, and she shut that down fast. Level wasn't the real problem. The real issue was the level itself, the kind you can only forge by training your body and your mind every single day. And then Naoki, acting like he had a shortcut, said that, according to the legend, the hero's level that brought down the Demon King was 55, so yeah, that means his level is already there, and honestly, that's downright absurd. He couldn't believe there was even a level 2, and suddenly it felt like a full-on RPG in his hands, because her words totally went right over his head. Except she said his power level was unbelievably special, then nothing felt off to him at all. So he declared he'd keep handling his job on his own, and as soon as he took off, Irene followed right behind, acting so weird it almost made his head spin. Next, he rushed to Chimera's place to ask her something, only to find a young, stunning fairy already there. She was totally caught off guard when, in her youthful body, she looked up and saw someone coming. Now it hit him. Every memory of this life came rushing back. After dying, he'd been thrown into this world, and he wasn't about to stop living the way he used to, as an exterminator and cleaner, wiping the mess out before it spreads. He had no clue what tomorrow would smash into his life in a brand new, brutal way. Because the very next day, Naoki sat down with his journal like always, and wrote everything new he'd been through so he wouldn't lose track of what had to be done. He even logged that extermination that Maz Maskell had funded to keep running for a while, so he told Chimera to handle it, and then he ordered her to rent the second floor of his shop since it was just sitting empty. The day kicked off with Naoki being shoved into a task where spirits and ghosts kept popping out of nowhere, one after another. Naoki tore them apart too, until he got cocky and blasted them with a high-grade healing potion, and it absolutely crushed it. And somehow he pulled off the mission to wipe out the ghosts haunting the Heen Guild. Then he immediately thanked him for the help, because those things had been doing some seriously awful stuff, even harassing him. Still, he couldn't believe the potion turned out so high quality since Naoki is insanely expensive. The answer hit him like a twist. The potion and the spray were homemade. He'd leveled up his pharmacy skills, stitched them together, and brewed a top-tier potion. And then he snagged a detection skill that throws up a map showing where every living creature is and how dangerous they are nearby. He cracked the world's secrets, figured out how everything actually works, and that's how he finally unlocked healing powers that could drive ghosts off for good. And just recently, he finally started loving this world after leveling up earned him skill points. Then he unlocked magical math and language tricks. Naoki burst into laughter the moment it clicked how damn clever he'd been. And when he checked his own skills, he realized that's exactly why he could finally talk to people with ease. All his hard work had paid off so hard that the fear of dying out on the streets vanished. He was overjoyed to live above Chimera, and every time trouble brewed, he'd rush to tell her. The very next day, she rushed over and told him, "Someone came to see you." Naoki couldn't shake the feeling. Who on earth was coming to see him? As he barreled downstairs, he spotted Irene waiting for him from the guild. He couldn't recall getting any requests from the guild, until she swore this one hit out of nowhere like a desperate plea for help because no one else could handle it but him. He snapped, "Wait, I'll be back in a minute," and rushed off to the bathroom. When he came back, Irene hit him with a jaw-dropper. This sudden request was straight up to exterminate a swarm of giant bees, nesting in a deserted house. When Naoki spotted those monsters in the encyclopedia Chimera let him borrow, the memory hit him hard, and Irene instantly confirmed it was all true. Meanwhile, Chimera practically basked in the praise, proud of both his looks and his knowledge. Right now, she's a sweet, young girl living with an old woman named Chimera. But the real twist is that Chimera used to stay forever young when she was younger, and when she stepped into a store, she snapped into an old woman's form. She swore an old woman hawking medicine would sell like wildfire, and when she learned it was finally preserved, she couldn't stop laughing. Irene leaned in and asked Naoki straight up if she would take this job, then demanded to know why she was picked, because she refused to be mistaken for some handyman. Naoki shut the idea down fast, saying his life mattered more than gambling on dangerous risks. Chimera said the Hornets' cases usually go to B-rank adventurers and up, but right now they're only checking people by their city rankings. Then her superior told her to come to Naoki personally, because sure, she's G-rank, but her Naoki's got a ridiculously high level. Naoki snapped that the guild's move was definitely shady, but since this was the first time he'd ever heard anything like it, he decided to look into it. Then he grilled Irene, asking if she knew Visa Hornets were dangerously poisonous. And unlike Maz Maskell, he couldn't just shrug it off. He tried to shut her down with a sorry. But the second she busted out that sad puppy face, he caved and told Irene to deliver it to her superior, who sent her to pressure her into accepting this sudden demand, because this wasn't fair at all. He snapped at her, asking what it all truly meant, then wheeled around to Chimera and demanded she come up with some kind of anesthesia that could shut down Hornets. After that, she thanked him for saying yes, shrugged it off like, "It's fine, handling Hornets is literally in my job description." Then gave him a confident nod, nailed the task, and stormed back to her work, prepping like crazy for the extermination. She leaned in and told Irene, "I'll do it if you help me," then laid out exactly what she needed, only for Irene to blurt out, a little flustered, that she could handle it no problem at all. Then she demanded to know where these Vissen nests were, and the answer hit. outskirts of Naoki Forest. Naoki clocked its position, right alongside the sewer, then fired off her max-level detection skill, instantly pinpointing the entire city and even tracking where every living creature was hiding, all keyed to their threat levels. A name showed up on the map above Naoki, and Irene just kept locking eyes on him until. Then Naoki chimed in. He'd spotted a hornet's nest, packed with them, and right on it were 3 glowing green dots, like there were people hiding inside. Irene and Chimera snapped into stunned silence when he instantly used a detection skill to spot even the wreckage from inside this very house. Then he coldly named the only safe position, an exact count of living creatures. Chimera screamed right after that, because sure, she'd lived for 800 years, but this level wasn't her own skill at all. She admitted she was a sealed-up researcher who still hadn't leveled up yet. After a while, Naoki finally tore his way to the destination, and when he saw the hornet's nest, his jaw dropped. This beehive was huge, like a 3-story building. He stared at the hornet's nest and thought, how do I even deal with this? Then figured the thing must be huge, since it looked about as big as a big dog. Then he charged right up to the nest. He studied the map covered in white hornet symbols and green dots showing living people nearby. And he figured, if those green dots were real, maybe they'd know how to handle the hornets. So he chose to slip through the back of the building first. He took a cautious breath, scanned the area like he was searching for danger, then slipped inside, and bam, an underground room hit him, right when he finally stared straight ahead. He spotted a staircase plunging into the dark. When he finally got there, a guy sprawled on the spot with a knife already in hand looked totally calm and told him it was time to swap shifts. Like my guy was one of his own conspirators. But the second Naoki greeted him, the man barked, "Who is he?" And the cameraman couldn't shake the question of why a prison like this even existed. Then he told the man straight up, "I'm not doing anything suspicious. I came here to take down the hornet." And he asked for the best way to do it. The man suddenly blurted out all kinds of details, making his story smell wrong, and now he'd caught a glimpse of his face. So there was no way he was letting him slip away alive. He lunged at Naoki with a knife, and Naoki scrambled for words to make him stop, only for the attacker to already go for the stab again. Then the twist hit. Naoki's knife snapped right in front of him, and shock swallowed the man whole. So he bolted from him, blurting that he had no clue why they'd pay him to handle someone this brutal. And Naoki scrambled in with a warning, shouting that the guy was way too strong so people could finally understand why he'd been warned in the first place. The second he saw Visa Hornet materialize right in front of him, the hornet drove its stingers straight through his entire body, crushing him to pieces. Naoki spotted a green dot vanishing off the detection map, and he instantly knew the hornets had struck, because those savage bees don't just invade territory. They defend it with violence. They were brutal insect eaters, hunting other bugs for meals. And when they found the perfect catch, they even rolled them up into little balls to haul back and feed their hungry babies. Naoki unleashed his fire skills and lit up the dark room like a blazing flare. That's when he spotted an old beast man and a young girl crammed inside the prison, and his mind started racing about what it all meant. Then it hit him. Those hinges could be the key. And with a sickening click, he slipped into the prison where the prisoner sat slumped with their head down. Naoki sized up the chaos, and even as they watched the prison door swing wide, neither of them dared to bolt, while the old beast man muttered that they were probably left behind and gave up. As the young girl choked out that she had no family and had been thrown away, Naoki couldn't shake what Irene, the slave trader, had told him. There were others out there too, and even different races among them. The old beast man looked Naoki in the eye and said he had no clue who he was supposed to be, but begged her to do it anyway. At the very least, take the young girl instead of him. The last owner had pushed her to the limit with her special talent. Then boom, she showed up from the gecko tribe, and the rotten man even slapped a petrifying spell on her. When he was finally done, the young girl begged to stay, while Naoki just wanted to finish his job, so he told them he couldn't leave. "They're here," they insisted, and told Naoki to get out. Then the girl suddenly screamed, warning him not to touch her. But he still did it. His hand drifted off the can, like he finally admitted he had his own reasons, even if insecurity twisted his gut. Meanwhile, Naoki exploded, screaming that the people who trapped them here started out like they had everything under control. Until their masks finally slipped. Naoki was innocent too. He'd been trapped far away by their lies, so he refused to swallow the cruel idea that every human would turn on them in the end. He could feel the pain in her words. She had to be absolutely wrecked, so he went all in. He yanked out a healing potion and sprayed it across her body. She screamed at him to stay back, shaking with fear, so he raised his voice and told her, "Don't worry, I'm just going to recite my spell." And he promised it wasn't dangerous. He begged for her to step closer, but she was trapped, still a slave. She didn't have the guts to stand up to Naoki, but he still stormed out, sprayed a healing potion on her. And when it didn't work even with a top-tier one, the girl crumpled into an even deeper sadness. Naoki then said he'd once read about a cure in an encyclopedia, but maybe his friend knew more, so the old beast man pressed her, asking if she truly believed it could be healed. Naoki told her not to get her hopes up, yet he made it clear they finally had something to chase, and he took off. He laid out exactly what that human was offering for treatment, and somehow, over time, she changed, no longer like the others. The girl agreed to follow, and the only snag left was Naoki, locked in chains. So he strained, tested the links, and figured he could make a move if he just pulled off one small trick. And boom, just like that, the chains snapped, and Baltzek and the girl froze in shock at the raw power he unleashed. Then Naoki slapped his hands together to clean off the aftermath, told them to get going now, and begged them to stay calm and move slow. With Visa Hornets guiding the way, they burst out, and the moment both of them cleared the door, the outside finally hit. She slapped her hands over her eyes because the sun was blinding, and it had been forever since she'd seen anything like it. Then she looked around. She couldn't believe it. The sky opened wide, the sun blazed bright, and a soft breeze brushed her like a promise. She started sobbing with relief, like the life she left behind might have killed her. And then Naoki explained everything so they wouldn't freak out about the bee anymore. Now he was stepping away for a breather, then going back, and Baltzek couldn't help wondering why he'd returned to the mansion while Naoki barged back into the house, and there it was, a pot dumped on the floor. He grabbed it, then fired up his cleaning skill to blast away every speck of dust and leave it looking brand new. Naoki shoved the pot into his bag, yanked out his chalk, and blasted a magic circle onto the ground, then used symbolism to craft the exact kind of heat he wanted, rewriting what the circle could do with every mark. The plan hit perfectly, and his heating initiation was finally complete. He stormed to the electrified section of the plan, bait for bee, and grabbed honey and water from Camero's medicine, then poured the water into a pot, fired up the magic circle to heat it, and stirred in the sedative and honey until it became the perfect trap. Then he swept it over the heat, boiling it down, exactly what Hornet always did when she took over a beehive. But the worst part, this was the main ingredient they used as bait, so Naoki cracked open the pot after he was done, and after a few hours. After that, countless bees dropped fast. Turns out the anesthesia solution worked perfectly, hitting exactly what it was meant to. When Naoki finally felt a burst of happiness, 2 other slaves slipped in behind him and blurted out what he was doing. Nakia couldn't believe it. It felt downright amazing. Naoki blinked in shock and demanded why they were here, then sprinted out fast with his brush, because time was running out, leaving the 8 hornets right where he needed them, perfectly paralyzed. Naoki drew the same magic circle on the bee's belly, cranked the fire's power up even higher, and right when the buzz roared from behind him, he read every sign through symbology, a high-level skill. After that, the alchemy kicked in. Those paralyzed hornets snapped back to normal within minutes, and Naoki stayed hidden and waited until the wasps slipped into their nest. Right after that, he tore out of there and vanished from the nest, maybe while the slaves were still trailing him. Naoki reassured them he'd be okay and would come back home after. After he finished the last move, He muttered a spell and surged heat into that magic circle. Then, the old man and the girl snapped into realization in the very next heartbeat. It was a hornet nest, and then, boom, it tore apart in a massive blast, sending the hornets scattering into pieces. And that even shocked Naoki, because he swore he'd only boosted his shot a tiny bit. But turns out that tiny bit was clearly everything. So yeah, nobody can even see who's really behind that question, right? Naoki clocks it and decides to stop hiding, so he steps up and introduces himself like a pro, a professional exterminator. And just like that, he grabs his things and walks away, because his job is finally done. As soon as he starts moving, 2 more slaves fall in behind him. Naoki can't help it and blurts out, "Why are you following me?" The old man snaps back. If they don't belong to anyone, those slaves become the next person's property the moment someone finds them. So from this moment on, those powers are Naoki's, and they're staying with him. Naoki's still wide awake while Sarah sleeps like nothing's happening, and he can't stop wondering if this world really works that way, if being right next to everything is normal. Because if that's the issue, then she'll never see the timing coming. She'll throw in the towel on this whole moral. But if it keeps happening, Naoki just can't help thinking about what it means. It could have labeled him a total loser. Then they told him, "Go to sleep," and he snapped, "Loser me." CP3. After the Visa Hornet bee crumbled, Naoki bragged that even though both of them were his now, he'd still sell them into slavery. Then Baltsac latched onto him, unable to stop, as he started inviting them in. Naoki's totally lost, because his life has finally steadied, and he knows he can't possibly feed 2 more mouths. Then he forces himself to start walking again, and it crushes their hearts, until a few steps in and the weight of the choice hits him, because if he keeps going, he's going to regret it. Naoki hauled his fresh slaves back to Kamira's place, then used clean magic to wipe every last mark of captivity off their bodies before he even stepped inside. Yet the moment Kamira realized he'd brought more slaves, she erupted in rage. As they'd planned, Naoki followed her lead and learned how to undo the petrification. Naoki led them straight to his room and told both of them to sit down. Then, on Kamira's word, he grabbed a needle, soaked it in a top-tier potion, and prepared to jab the petrified spot to break the curse. Naoki finally wiped out every last hint of petrification. Then Naoki finally noticed leftover scales still clinging to his ears and thighs, and he told him those weren't just scars, but a gecko tribe trait that helped them vanish into the night. Suddenly, Kamira's emotions exploded, and to everyone's shock, Sarah dropped into her seat and she bowed low to thank him for treating her, and he told Naoki to let her stay at his side forever. Naoki only brought them together because he couldn't walk away, but once it happened, he made it brutally clear. He couldn't juggle his work life with both of them in the picture. She told him to kill her right then if that was the truth, and she never thought it would end up like this. Naoki only realized after Baltsac told him they had nowhere else left to go, and with slave seals clamped on, finding work like that became nearly impossible. Naoki really wanted to help them, so he told them they could hang with him for now. Just don't make it awkward or stiff. He wanted things to feel casual right from the start. After all those moments piled up, he finally stepped up and introduced himself to both of them the right way, and Baltsac immediately matched it, laying out his name next and showing up like he meant business. But Naoki reminded Baltsac that this was already formal for him, so Baltsac snapped his tone around fast, greeted Naoki like it was nothing, and figured he'd quickly. Sarah still exploded, shouting like she owned the place, and Baltsac didn't dare push back. So he swallowed his pride, nodded, and insisted he'd learn from him too just to make it all work. Naoki shot back with a cheeky okay, admitted he didn't know how long he'd be watching out for the kid, and said until then he'd keep it under his own wing. Then Naoki snapped, "We've got to do this now. Go shopping." And the 3 of them hit the market streets, weaving between stalls like kids in a candy store. Naoki even dragged his slaves straight to a clothing shop and picked up a bunch of stuff, and ever since then, he made sure they rocked matching clothes. Baltsac and Sarah had yelled that they'd never accept fancy clothes for people like them, slaves. while Naoki snapped at them to keep quiet, saying that was just an old outfit he'd told them to drop off, and demanding they tell him what else they wanted to talk about. Balsek swallowed his words, grabbed the thing, and took it for himself. Then Naoki snapped, furious that he was still acting so casual. Naoki insisted it didn't matter but still asked what Balsek wanted. Balsek puffed out his cheeks, swore he was fine, and added that if he messed up Naoki's servant, everyone would laugh at Naoki. I don't think he meant to quit his service, until he spotted those cute hair ribbons for girls and yanked Sarah over for a quick look. He slipped the ribbon into her hair, leaned in, and grinned like, "Yep, this looks insanely good on you." It looked like she just couldn't take something like this, and Naoki panicked that she'd make it too official, so he told her, "If you hate it, just toss it anywhere." And somehow she couldn't stop herself. Because she liked the real version of it, she went next to listening to him talk about grabbing food before heading home, and when she heard it, she snapped that the servants had no business eating with them. Again, while he just told her to loosen up. He stuffed his food and told her, "Go now." Then he sprinted after them, and the whole day slid by in peaceful quiet. The very next day, Naoki was stuck at home when Balsek burst in to wake him up and shouted that Irene from the guild had come to see him. So now Naoki's wondering if she's really here because of him. When he finally drops down, everyone's already seated, and Irene lets out a hopeful good morning. But the mood hits wrong. Something looks oddly annoyed, and it just stares her down like Irene's done something. She leans in and whispers to Balsek, "What happened?" And he snaps back that his mood is wrecked, because he remembers the date he and Irene promised to take. Now Irene blurts out that she's relieved. Both slaves are okay, though that weird master's performance is still what's truly throwing her off. He admits he's kinda worried about his future, then tells Irene their date is only 3 days away, only for her to cut in and say she's actually here on another request, to go dig up whatever's left in the grave by the ruins, right where Irene's nest is. She tells him the government wants every last trace wiped out, so he decides to finish the job that's still hanging there, and then he leans in to tell Irene if it's really like that. He pushes to let Balsek and Sarah handle it. Sarah's sharp assessment skills and Balsek's incredible nose could make all the difference. So when Irene hears that plan, she's genuinely stunned. He shoots the question at them, "Are there any slaves who can do it?" And she admits she could, but demands Naoki's confirmation first, because slaves only go through their master's side. Naoki just shrugs it off and says he's got another job to handle with Irene. So once he sent both of them off to work, everything would finally be okay, because Sarah was practically vibrating with excitement to get it done. After that, Naoki told Irene they could chat as they walked, and when she agreed, it totally blew him away. Then he shot his shot for a date. He wanted to know what she wanted from him in return for her help. Irene smiled and said it was simple. He looked like he knew everything, and she wanted to learn more about this world, because even he didn't know everything about the world and the afterlife, and that truth left her just as shocked. With a shaky sign, he told her, "This world's called Sophia, and its surface is split earth, with the end right at the horizon." Naoki tried to picture it like Earth at first, until he realized it was sliced straight through, cutting horizontally into two. And the city they're in is called Kenya, so far off the mainland, Aka the wasteland, that it's almost untouchable, and it's peaceful here because there's no war, just one catch. Messages from the outside world take forever to arrive. That's all she knows about this place, and honestly, it's more than enough for her. He can't stop wondering what fate is waiting out there, beyond the walls for everyone. Thinking back on the days he had a TV and a smartphone that made facts pop up instantly, he doesn't even miss that setup or the whole easy lifestyle that came with it. Because what really burns inside him is the need to know the outside world, to figure out what else is waiting out there and where he's headed. And if he doesn't get answers soon, it'll feel just as suffocating as being locked in a cell, like Balsek and Sarah. As he paces, doubt gnaws at him. Did the God who brought him here actually send eyes to watch too, just like he's watching them from the other side of the cell? Naoki tilts his head back and stares at the sky, staring into the endless sprawl of this world, wondering if God is still watching from above. But he slams those thoughts out of his head and refocuses fast. Then Irene clocks something, off, and asks if he's okay, and he just waves her off, telling her it's nothing. And he demands that Irene come to him the moment she spots any promising job openings, because he knows they aren't adventurers, and enslaved won't exactly win hearts from employers. But that thought doesn't stop her. A spark of hope flares when she remembers they might still have a job they can pull off. When Naoki finally bursts into his home, Sarah and Kamira greet him. Yet for some reason, he's still clutching a towel in his hand as he asks Sarah about it. He reminds her of it. And suddenly, they're not just talking anymore, because they've really got plans to go there and bathe together. They head out to the public bath together, and Sarah somehow guides Naoki like she's been here forever. He's stunned by how much she knows about the city. Then he realizes she's been researching the place, so when he finally arrives, she'll be ready to help him. He spots the public bath's massive chimney and swears it had to be pure magic, and Sarah drops the truth. This place was built by someone over 2,000 years ago, and people swear that means they'll be reborn as a person from another world. Sarah froze, totally blindsided by hearing something so wild and unexpected. So he couldn't help but press for more details about this other-world guy, and the answer came back fast. Nobody really knows anything about him, just his name. Naoki then tried to picture what it'd feel like to live as a normal person, the way this reincarnated world traveler is doing here, and those thoughts stuck in his head for a while. The very next day, Baltsek and Sarah pushed deeper into the forest, tore through the town outskirts, and jumped in to smash every monster they ran into. While Naoki watched, jaw dropped, realizing just how dangerously skilled Baltsek was in a fight. So he asked if Baltsek wanted to power up his sword. Baltsek answered politely, grateful as hell, because the artifact-level blade could have been forged from strength beyond even his own thigh. And when it hit home, he apologized for the trouble. Naoki didn't even flinch at Sarah's sudden request. He just said it was fine, because honestly, this is exactly how it should be. The moment Sarah had to make that big decision, it was already there a while ago. Baltsek never dreamed a slave like him could land a job as a gravekeeper, until Naoki's recommendation got him into the Naoki Guild. And Irene warned him the last gravekeeper was wiped out by Visa Hornets. Baltsek asked if he needed to talk to Sarah about Naoki's decision, but he held his tongue, waiting for the perfect moment, because if he brought it up now, Naoki would explode and make a scene. Still, he grinned, convinced this would work out for him for sure. Then he headed to the guild on the right side as, once he joined the Adventurers Guild, he didn't waste a second. Before long, he was living the life of an adventurer. Naoki told him he could unlock a bunch of skills here, skills that would fit him better than anything else, and he said it straight up. After taking the same test, he knew he wasn't made for either a sword or a staff. Then he blurted that he'd train as hard as he could and carve out his own weapon in the future. Naoki watched that determination blaze in his eyes, thrilled by it. Yet a tiny alarm still tugged at him. Naoki leaned in and told him straight, "My feelings for you aren't like a normal master and servant. If I drop you now, your fear of everyone will just grow teeth." Naoki didn't want him to hurt like that, but he still pushed him to stand on his own, because it'd be simpler that way, and Baltsek knows it. Naoki has already made his choice, and before long, he'll flash that annoying look. Baltsek tries, but Naoki shuts him down the moment he starts talking like that, and after that they steamroll ahead. Then they lock in on the real job, wiping out the actual goblin, the mission that suddenly popped up the instant they decided they wanted to team up with Sarah, and Naoki tells him that once he finishes the request, he's always forced to bring back proof. Like with the goblins, he can just grab its ears, toss them in the bag, and then sprint back to the guild. But for Irene, it's never that simple. She spots the bag packed with goblin ears and instantly panics about the money on the line. She demands to know how many he's hunted, and he smugly says his detection skills led him to a whole nest of goblins in the cave. So they wind up taking down 636 in total, and Irene blurts that even 5 would have been plenty. She demands to know where he went, and whether he's got a problem hunting more, and Irene insists it's a blessing that he wiped out so many. But the payment she promises depends on the exact number of goblins he smashes, and when Naoki finally gets it, he realizes the guild straight up doesn't have the cash to pay him that much. He thinks it over for a second, then immediately turns to Irene and asks for help. After he lays it all out, she calls for his assistance too, and Balzac hits him with the news. He's back from his training, but exhaustion crushed him, and the country's training felt way harsher than he'd ever imagined. Balzac ordered him to wash himself clean with a health potion, and right after that, his trainer finally clocked exactly who he was. Because she was this stunning woman in bikini-like armor, and she stepped forward, smiling as she introduced herself as Master Isle, the instructor of the guild. She told Naoki she'd seen his mind-blowing magic talent firsthand, and asked if he was cool with it, because she'd be thrilled to write him a recommendation letter for the capital's magic academy. Naoki was told this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, but he didn't even want to listen. He outright refused, then just stayed right where he was, Sarah's slave. A slave was only meant to stay glued to their master's side, yet she still couldn't shake the shock that a slave would actually grow close enough to chase her dream and study at the capital's magic academy. She vowed to tell Naoki that his talent was truly outstanding, because letting it sit and stagnate like this was a tragedy. Naoki asked, "Did you hear it yourself?" But she burst into tears and clung to her own selfish desire to. He swore he'd stay with Naoki no matter what, and refused to go anywhere near the capital. He decided to give them space and stepped back. While that happened, Naoki finally chose the perfect moment to say what he needed, because everyone was gathered and Naoki was there too. He kept thinking, tomorrow I'm out of here. So today, it had to be his final day with every single one of them, including himself. He admitted he knew nothing about this world, until he talked to Irene and saw how thrilled she was to explore the city, and suddenly he craved to see what was out there. Then he blurted that if she brought him along, he'd just slow her down, and the moment that hit, tears poured out of him. But he couldn't argue with the truth. Naoki kept hammering it into him. "I'll do it," while he trudged as the town's gravekeeper, right in the middle of everyone's obsession with that marking. He was dead set on doing it and told him, "If I die, just throw me back." She hated hearing that, and the way he kept glancing at her like her attention was oxygen. He liked her so much he'd hide every injury from her, even if that meant risking both of them. They warned him the area outside the city could be brutal, and he just smirked back that his level had jumped. He'd be fine. Irene froze because she knew his level was already sky-high. Then he went and lifted way too much and it hit her. She realized it reminded him of something, and he insisted he had to do it. Tried to climb his rank to F, and Naoki immediately peppered him with, "How do I boost it?" Wild timing, since Irene knew Naoki didn't care about ranks at all. Naoki then explained that after he sent Balzac and Sarah to a different grave, they got laughed at for daring to beg a master with a G rank. He hurried to apologize for letting something like that slip through, then asked if he shouldn't do it again. So Irene let out a tired sigh and warned him this would be the last time she'd send him to that counter. But he had to hear it. She and the guild were truly thankful for everything he'd done up to this point. Naoki's heart lit up when they thanked him, so he fired back right away, thanking them for everything too. Irene and her guild pulled it off for her. Then she marched straight to the examiner and realized it was Isle. She introduced herself again since this was the exam, and he actually thanked her for doing it. Next, Irene got hit with the rules. She had to use any trick she could to make him acknowledge her, and if she succeeded, she passed. The other guild adventurers clocked it, and when they realized Isle was about to go toe-to-toe, they rushed in for a front row show. Isle fought hard, but they were stunned to see his opponent was only ranked G, a beginner in weird, mocking clothes, and they couldn't wait to see him flail. Naoki grabbed the wooden sword, braced himself, and stepped into the fight. And yeah, others packed the spot too, just to stare at the fight as it went down. Then everyone erupted in cheers for Sarah to give it everything, while the instructor was getting the exact same thunderous hype too. Ale soaked up the cheers, grinned, and let Naoki take the first swing, while Naoki held back, knowing he couldn't give it his all without risking Ale getting hurt. But Ale brushed that off, zeroed in, and charged straight at Naoki to land the attack. Naoki slammed his wooden sword in front of it, refusing to be stopped. Like 1,000 excuses still wouldn't be enough to take him down. Then he drove his sword straight into his own chest, but Naoki felt nothing and stared in shock as the blade never even cut him. He got it. His powers were kicking in. Ale demanded to know what kind of magic this was, and just like that, Naoki struck again, going for something way stronger, then vanished from Sarah's sight to set up the next blow. He just prayed the island instructor could beat Naoki so he'd have a shot at staying in this city. But the moment he tried to outassess Naoki, he realized it was hopeless, because even while he was getting attacked, Naoki couldn't be beaten. Naoki fought the urge to swing because he knew he wasn't ready to go all out, and one bad hit could make everything worse. But with no choice left, he slammed back using the bare minimum force. And people still figured this would hit even harder, because Naoki was level 70 now. No one expected him to get this terrifying. That crushing blow sent him crashing down, and he blacked out on the floor, trying to ask if the other was okay. The crowd gaped in shock as Naoki only landed one hit, so fast they couldn't even track his movement. Yet Irene knew right then he'd gotten stronger, and after a few minutes, Ale finally opened his eyes and then he realized Naoki was gone. He hurried to ask if he'd scraped by with a passing grade, and Naoki nodded yes. He truly had clawed his way up, rank and all. He dropped a heartbreaking face and stormed off, and he couldn't stop wondering if he'd messed up as she stared at him in silence. Then S burst in, wrapped her arms around him, and sobbed. She made it crystal clear. She wouldn't stand to be torn away from him, not unless Sarah finally smiled, because he still had to go. That night he threw a huge party for everyone, swearing they'd celebrate his final night in the city. Then the whole crowd chowed down and drank like there was no tomorrow. Sarah was there too. Then the party wrapped up and they all crashed into sleep. And the very next morning, right at the city's entrance gate, Naoki stood ready to bolt out. He thanked everyone for seeing him off early that morning, but right away people noticed something was off. He didn't look well at all, and Naoki was still way too drunk from last night. The same mess hit Camira and Irene too, and their goodbye was basically a party full of non-stop vomiting. Irene told him the guild would settle the bill for Sarah and Baltsac using what it owed her, and he immediately thanked Irene for taking the time to hear him out. Naoki shoved the last rent money into Camira's pocket and thanked her for taking care of him. Then he turned to Sarah and Baltsac and demanded one thing: release them from their slave seals. So he had them show him the seals right then. Camira demanded to know how to free them, and he shot back that all she had to do was declare they were free. Then it would all happen. Naoki echoed the same instructions, and boom, the slave seals on both of them shattered away. Naoki shot them both a grateful nod, thanking them for every ounce of hard work they'd poured into it. Sarah snapped that he still wouldn't let Naoki out of his sight, but Naoki hit back hard, saying now he wasn't a slave anymore, he could choose who he followed, and if Sarah pushed him, Naoki swore he'd never talk to him again. The words hit Sarah like lightning, and panic swallowed him whole. But yeah, it was obvious he was just joking. Still, he gave a polite answer and told the guy he couldn't carry the weight of someone else's life. Then someone tossed him an idiom, and he admitted he loves things that everyone should value at every meeting, because once they're gone, they'll never come back. It means you could meet your friends, or anyone else, one last time without warning, so you'd better cherish every second while you can. And he genuinely believes and loves that kind of thing, which is why he told SI to respect his wishes. Then Camira leaned in and asked if he still remembers how furious he was when he brought those two slaves, saying his face might be hinting at something with a real meaning tied to it. But from her side, what he's doing right now looks just like those other slave traders who ditch people the second things turn ugly. And if he truly wanted space, he should have freed them long before now. Naoki couldn't shake one last regret. He should have known better, and when the moment hit, he snapped at Chimera like she'd gone a little too sharp again. Irene then explained that graduating the Magic Academy usually takes 7 years, but if you skip grades, you could blast through in just 2, and Naoki immediately told Irene, "Don't say that." So she blared her promise that no matter what happens, he'll get stronger, because right then, he's going to come to her. Naoki figured he couldn't stall any longer, let out a heavy sigh, then stepped forward and shoved a bag into their hands, saying it was a communication bag with a magic circle stitched inside, so they could reach each other no matter how far he had to run to get here for this emergency. Then it all turned emotional. He promised he'd call her every 5 minutes, but she shut it down on the spot. If Naoki told her she was wasting the line, it would have been a disaster, so she yanked it back now that the farewell was finally over. So she took one last step forward and told everyone goodbye, because saying it back wasn't easy, but they just couldn't stop themselves. They waved her goodbye with smiles and pure joy, as Naoki finally set off on foot. She refused to slow down until the call crackled from her communication bag, straight from Naoki, no question. Naoki finally broke into motion, striding farther and farther until she vanished from view, never once glancing back, then kept going straight ahead, like nothing could pull her off course. On her journey, random merchants would pull up and offer to help her travel, but she'd shut them down every time because she wanted to walk alone at her own pace, with that freedom that just felt right. But on the way, Naoki's detection skills flared and told him something unseen was tailing him from behind. He snapped into action, drew a tiny magic circle etched with symbols, and laid an ivy trap to snare them on the spot. Naoki leaned in and told them, "I'm not picking fights. Give it time, the magic will fade on its own." Then he teased, "So you're really that cold-hearted demon style?" They fired back that they weren't chasing power at all. Their level just shot up because of what they do, only they didn't even know what the job was. "We're just kind to anyone who wipes out environmental pests," they said. He couldn't wrap his head around how strong that pest exterminator was, and how badly people misunderstood him. Then he bluntly said he'd have to leave unless the island wanted him to keep being a useless instructor. Now that he finally saw something he actually cared about, he realized it was all Sarah's, and his next move was the neighboring city of Oslo. He even volunteered to guide the way uninvited, like he belonged there. Then he pressed him again, why chase someone like him, and went so far as to quit the guild. That alone screamed, yeah, he's famous around here. That's why he refused to swallow his defeat. He knew he was a total battle maniac, so he leaned in and demanded how he'd managed to stay unharmed by his attacks back then. Naoki shot back that he just enchanted their clothes to crank up their strength and defense, because he refused to let them get torn up. And when Isle saw how powerful he could make a mere symbol of strength, she was blown away. Ale still tried to bolt, even after all that. So when Naoki pressed him, Ale snapped into panic and begged to stay, swearing he'd fight monsters his own way to help, and promising he'd step in whenever Naoki was too weak. Then he bragged about how he could dissect monsters and cook their meat for him, only for Naoki to say he could get the same thing by just buying it once, and the disappointment hit Ale's face hard in the island city. So he begged her again to let him be her friend. Chimera was finally certain. This world had no limits, not for women at all, and she told him to bury his thoughts for now, because she'd back him up in battles and even surgeries. For the moment, she promised she'd be there no matter what, so he'd better wait for the right time to try and cut her loose. After pacing for a bit, they finally stumbled into Oslo, and Naoki's eyes immediately started to scan everything around him. Turns out the city still looked basically the same as before. Isle explained it wasn't a whole new place, just a change in how it looked. She stared at him, totally confused by what he meant. Then he told her they had to rush over and sign a contract. Naoki even tried to speak up at first, but the truth hit hard. He'd blown every last cent on Sarah and Baltsac, and now she was left completely broke. Then they headed straight for the Adventurers Guild in the city, and she offered to front him some cash if he was broke. but he shot back that he'd rather spend his money helping people and fighting than hoarding it. Now he decides it's time to step up, earn his own money, and build more islands. So he logs into missions on his own and spots a job to hunt wild boars, and Naoki leans in, because he wants something he can handle and afford, and one of those requests hits him right in the chest. He used it to submit a reception request. Then after the receptionist laid eyes on it, she approved him on the spot. Naoki stared in awe at the isle's real rank, then immediately asked if he wanted to boost it, promising it would widen Naoki's search options. But Naoki snapped back that he wasn't cut out for risky missions, so he'd rather go for something safer. At the guild, the adventurers instantly recognized him by his legend. Demon Sword Isle, the guy who rocked bikini armor like it was his calling card. Then Naoki slammed his request on the counter and told the receptionist that his F rank was the only thing he had. Right outside the guild, every adventurer started snickering at his F rank, even while he stood beside Ale, and they kept ragging on him non-stop. But Naoki didn't care a single bit, and I told him again straight to his face that they kept laughing at him for not raising his rank like that was some kind of joke. I told him, it's fine, it happens all the time. Then Naoki pressed him, asking if he was really okay being mocked. Then his gaze snapped to the quest he picked, wiping out a cockroach infestation on the slave dealer's land, and he yelled that he wasn't doing this for real experience, but because his only mission was to cover Inez, even if it didn't make sense. After all, what another adventurer had been targeting felt wrong to him. With a laugh, he accepted her request, sure, but it was a joke Isle hated. He cracked a grin and told her it was fine, and still Isle couldn't let it go. Then Naoki shot her a reminder. Pest control was his duty, not sword swings or magic spells, so this is why. This request was nothing to him. He broke into a grin to calm her down, promised he'd do it, and walked away feeling totally satisfied the moment her smile lit up. Then the two of them split up and charged straight into their own quests with Naoki finally arriving in the slave trader's land. An old maiden intercepted him and told him exactly who'd been sent to lead him deep into the place. He grinned and followed her, stepping into a brand new quest packed with wild new experiences. Naoki remembered the truth. God really did pick him to be reborn here, and right from the start, he was given one brutal mission: clean up the pests and exterminate them, even if it meant living that nightmare job. Then he started hearing about others like him, other people who had been chosen too, and the hope hit hard. So he snapped his life into motion, determined to travel the whole world and hunt down one of them, no matter what it cost. That meant tearing himself away from the key people he'd grown close to in this world, and setting out anyway. Along his journey, he'd end up crossing paths with even more people, and he'd genuinely cherish every single encounter. Right now, he's racing through his assigned search spot, ready to scrub the cockroach bugs out of existence. Those shiny black pests are nothing to him. When he checks the place, he's hit with one thing first. The mansion is massive, 3 stories tall. He wastes no time and asks if he can start cleaning and exterminating immediately. Then it clicks. Most houses in this world are built from nothing but wood and stone. He can't stop imagining the wooden houses rotting and the stone walls crumbling, until the bug croaches slip in and start multiplying inside. So he fires up his detection skills and searches the entire house from top to bottom. And then it hits him. This whole house crawls with hidden cockroaches, skittering around and lurking inside the walls. He steps into the house and tells everyone he lays eyes on that they're all slaves, including him, then demands they stop with the unnecessary touching. And of course, someone blurts that he's acting like the head of the house. Everyone keeps asking him for help, and he smashes through every job for everyone like it's nothing. He rushes to find his busy master, calls out again and again, and finally gets an answer, only to freeze when it's time to report the janitor's arrival. He gets brushed off with a cold, "I'm busy," and so he leaves it to his master, while the master sits there baffled, wondering why the servant didn't sell Kamuro today. Seeing Tell's face didn't even twitch after that sudden order proved just how unshakable he was. Now he's ready to kick off the search, and after checking for a while, he storms back to the guild and heads straight to the dining room, where Ale is waiting. They start mapping out their quest the moment Naoki rushes back early, and he pushes for a game plan on how to finish it. Then his eyes catch that his bag is already stuffed, so he can only think it's packed with spoils of war, and he snatches the bag eagerly without even asking. And when he cracks it open, he's met with a bunch of weird, impossible stuff hiding inside. He goes from setting sticky traps for pests to snooping through other adventurers' stuff, and the moment he spots the weird, dirty mess, he lets out a brutal scream. Ire snaps at Naoki fast, blaming him for leaving garbage like that on the dining table, and then she shouts that someone must have opened it without permission. Next morning the sun blazed up, and Naoki shot off right away to handle his job, because yesterday's investigation taught him the mansion was packed with two nightmares, bugs and masmaskal, so he armed himself with rat poison and sticky traps, only to find fighting both was a total headache, especially the insects and those awful cockroaches. So he pulled out his detective instincts and tore through the place where the cockroaches. They were scattered all through the mansion, and he realized he'd need something massive to get the job done. So he demanded explanations for wiping out those cockroaches for good. Start by hunting them down all the way from the third floor to the ground floor. Then Naoki hit him with the real task. Rip out the source roots, the basement. She swore there wasn't a basement like that here, but when he told the truth, it clashed with what his master had ordered. Still, he nodded and led him straight to the door, where the basement was packed with prison bars and slaves all around. He warned him to keep his distance and watch every step, because get too close and they might come for him. Naoki was convinced he was right. He had to stay sharp, because those slaves were valuable to the slavers, so he couldn't move too freely. That's why Tell needed to dodge the basement question, because if anyone orders him in there, the slave would instantly look at him with suspicion. Naoki knew he had to be careful, or everything could blow up. Now they're pushing toward the lowest room where rot, sweat, and dirt choke the air, like the perfect hideout for cockroaches. And there it is, just one prison cell completely sealed shut. He asks if he can use the room, and he doesn't even mind, but he snaps a warning. The slave inside is from the wolf tribe, and that anger is vicious. Naoki figures he'll be okay, so he steps into the prison and plunges into the dark that made. The wolfman slave snapped at anyone who stepped in, so Tell said straight up that if he needed the room for a while, he'd better deal with it. The wolfman still lunged at Naoki the exact same way, right as he'd warned, but Naoki shoved him back and fired off a bit of fire magic to knock him calm. Then Naoki promised the healing potion later, yet for now, he refused to give it. He stormed out of the room and demanded, "Did you do what I told you earlier?" And the guy nodded, admitting that everything had been handled just like he ordered. He demanded every door and window shut tight, ordered the cooks to clear out and kill every stove, then pushed her to confirm it could be done, because that would turbocharge the whole destruction plan. She just asked what came next. Could she ditch the slave from here? But that wasn't an option, so Naoki snapped back into his role, glaring at her like, "Get out," then warning her this room was about to blow up with noise. He told her to leave, that she was fine, and that it was her duty. Naoki couldn't shake it. She looked way too sharp and strong for an exterminator, like she might be a spy planted by one of their rivals. The contract tied his hands, so he couldn't question her or chase her off, but he swore he'd keep eyes on her every move. Right after that, Naoki turned symbolism into a spark, built a tiny induction heater, and pulled out a little box, and snapped it onto the circle. He leaned in, asking what would happen next, but Naoki was so locked into his work that he'd already slammed the magic circle to life. Then he circled the whole house, sweeping every corner clean, and only after they activated those small boxes holding the magic circle, a puff of smoke burst out with a sharp little crack, and right then, you could tell something terrifying had just happened. The moment she heard that explosion crack above them, she snapped, "What did you do?" And he grinned, saying he'd cooked up smoke using the same ingredients as rat poison and trap glue, then marched into every room, dropping a medicine box beside a magic circle, And now, he just flipped every trap on except the one in this room. That one's his homemade insecticide, a gas that slips into everything and still wipes out tiny pests like cockroaches. He questioned whether simple smoke could really take down the monster, and then, right on the spot, he was told to jam a cloth in his mouth fast. He shot back, "You can do it," then made it clear he'd have to prove the thing was truly destroyed, show it to the guild so they'd finally get what he was trying to pull off. He asked, "If this whole house went up in flames, except for one room, what would you do?" And straight away, he said he'd sprint like his life depended on it and hide in that one room. Right then it finally clicked. He grabbed the main idea from Sarah. His plan was simple and terrifying. He'd force every last cockroach to swarm into this room. They're sprinting in right now, and in seconds this room is swarmed. Thousands of cockroaches crawling everywhere. Naoki zooms in with his sharp detection skills and realizes every single insect cockroach has packed into the basement room. So he fires off his last ignition, and it slices through every last one of them in a single, unstoppable strike. They told him the smoke won't hurt you in tiny doses, but if you gulp too much, it can turn dangerous fast. So he immediately asked, "Am I okay?" Then it hit him. He'd already fainted just standing there. Right then, he decided he had to get him out of here. No excuses, no waiting. The very next morning, Naoki shoved off before sunrise in the carriage, leaving everything behind as the day began to wake up. He thanked the carriage driver for picking him and his friends up, and the driver just assumed they were perfectly fine. While Naoki headed for the next town, and Isle kept teasing him, insisting he couldn't be an ordinary person, because his laughter felt like a whole story that only he could make happen. From a third person, it looked like an adventurer took on a simple cleaning job and somehow hauled back a maid. Then Naoki cut it down fast, saying he couldn't help because the dealer didn't have the cash to pay him. He froze in pure disbelief when he realized his house was crawling with cockroaches. Turns out, by the 2 knots per cockroach math, the last price came out to 20,000 knots, so the slave trader went dead quiet, and Naoki, still polite as ever, he asked if she wanted to be a slave. Naoki shot back that he wasn't like that, then told her to step up and ask Naoki, straight up, to buy her. Naoki nearly choked on shock when they told her to offer herself like that, and boom, just like that, she got shoved into her current nightmare. She heard the truth. She'd spent most of her life in the mansion as a servant, and they said her experience was decent enough to be useful. Then she thanked him for buying her, even while her body couldn't do the physical work anymore. And when she admitted he used to be a teacher, he didn't want her failing to ruin his name, so the man basically bullied her back into it. Naoki stepped in and introduced himself as his companion, but Naoki snapped back that they weren't friends. Then it all shattered as she broke down in tears, asking if he wasn't good enough for her and demanding he keep his distance. And instead of pushing back, he pulled the sweetest move, handing her some nice gifts. By evening, Naoki fought to keep his hands off his stuff, and honestly, even the island scent was so good it had his heart racing. "So tell him to bow his head and promise he'll do it from now on under your care." He begged her to be honest with him, but she flat out refused to be truthful with her master. Their journey rolled on, and I couldn't wait to ask Naoki what he was plotting next. And yup, their time in Oslo barely lasted at all. He snapped that he only went there to keep the cost of living covered, and now he wants her to keep roaming the world, so the story puts it to him. If that's really the issue, he had to hop on a boat to reach the next city, and the moment he heard about it, pure joy exploded in him. He gave the plan instant approval and couldn't wait for the ride. Naoki praised his work to the top of his lungs, and pride swelled in him like, "I'm actually useful to him." Then Al burst out laughing as Naoki struggled to get the words out to his senior. Right out of nowhere, a swarm of wyverns dove out of the sky, circling them and boxing in their carriage from every side. Naoki jolts as a thunderous roar rattles the air outside. Then the carriage driver screams that wyverns have swarmed all around them, and he slams the brakes right away. Ale slammed down from the carriage and tore off to hunt those wyverns, dangerous flyers that swoop out of the sky and rip into their prey. The wyverns are fuming, because to climb to rank B, an adventurer has to take one down. So with so many of them out there, Naoki can't just peek outside the carriage or he'll be in real trouble. On one side, a bunch of merchant carriages sit lined up, and on the other side Ale is squaring off with wyverns all by himself, swinging hard, fighting for his life. Then he calls out, asking if Al needs help, but Al just smirks and says he's got these lizard monsters handled, because maniac or not, that dude is built for battle. After that, hunger hits him hard. He whips around and asks if wyverns can be eaten, claiming their meat is delicious because those wyverns get hunted down. They hacked the meat into pieces, then threw it over roaring flames to cook it up. They lit the fire, ready to cook up a seriously delicious lunch. Everyone else is ecstatic over this rare win, but he can't resist rubbing salt in the wound. It's also the first time she's seen how her master acts with everyone else, so she blurts, "Is he always like this?" Ale answers, "If I start talking about my messiness, it's because I just met you recently." He insists he's gotta be fun to hang with, and honestly, wherever he shows up, it feels like everybody nearby instantly gets pulled into the same story. They finally start seeing what kind of lord they've got, and then one of the carriage drivers blurts out, "Wind can't be here. This is the time of year when red dragons hunt us, like they've been doing for ages." Tamira can't stop wondering, could this blazing red dragon be one of those insanely dangerous, massive monsters? Then one of the transporters leans in and demands, are they the real deal adventurers? He wants them to check out the Red Dragon Cave nearby, because lately it's been mowing down people around the village. So he's itching to know about that red dragon, and now she turns to the other two like, should we go check it out? After a sudden call is made, they act shocked and tell her they can't believe it. But she shrugs it off, grits her teeth and goes for it, even as screams tear through the air. 2 hours later, they finally rolled into Marina Port, the gateway to the whole continent. And it was bigger, louder, and way more alive than anything Naoki had seen yet. As night fell, a whole crowd of ships pulled into the port, and while they still had the dark to work with, they rushed over to the guild, got everything set up, and then woke up for the next morning. A mouth-watering breakfast already sat on the table, ready to be devoured, telling everyone when he finally slid into the dining table. Naoki dug in, then urged Naoki to try the mouth-watering meal, and Naoki swore he hadn't tasted it yet. So he sat down and told Naoki to sit too, because he refused to play servant while his master ate at the same table, and once again he reassured him he could, since the food would only get cold. He dug into breakfast, took a bite, and right after he tasted it, he said her answer was pure sunshine, and the food she cooked was downright heavenly. Both of them were feeling it right then. Moki and Isle went after other dishes, and Isle even scooped some off his own plate, while Tell stared at it all, and a weird, unsettling pressure started building in her chest, like something was about to snap. Then they cut through the shopping district, heading straight to the exact spot where his brand new request was supposed to happen. She'll read his order, clean the shipyard, then wipe out the manifestation, and he'll lean in and demand, "Are you sure? If so, do it right now." The moment she pocketed a hefty payout from her last search, he shrugged and said the boat ride wouldn't break the bank for the three of them. And Naoki practically admitted he'd been dreaming about getting a boat for themselves. And that whole thing hit her like a shock, because owning her own boat was one world, but just riding one for once, that was another. After he heard his reasoning, if he had his own boat, he could sail whenever and wherever he wanted. It clicked in his head, and he knew this wasn't optional. He had to travel the whole world. Naoki even admitted it could be smart, but a tiny boat still cost a fortune, so he'd handle it himself since he pulled off a speed of 20,000 knots in a single day. And the island immediately erupted into laughter. While they're agreeing to do it, he tells them their new mission is to set up Naoki, and that they'll head straight to the shipyard, while Ale keeps hawking bags packed with wyvern scales, plus that rare meat that sells for a fortune. And then it hits him. He remembers the day he first heard about the red dragon, and they even marched straight into the cave. Way too massive for them to keep doubting it was the dragon's lair. Then he charged straight at the monster, an enormous red dragon that made the whole air shake. He promised himself, "I'll train up before I face the extraordinary dragon aura," and he warned his buddy to stay razor alert because he might have seen the answer before. So he burned through his skill points and learned the dragon's language. Now he finally got it. This dragon wasn't mad for no reason. An intruder had busted into its lair after Naoki, and rage was blazing. The red dragon then reached out to Naoki to make the point. As he explained the wyvern, the dragon practically bolted out to take them on and munch them up. Naoki even heard the wyverns were already dead. So he couldn't help but blink in surprise at how this introverted beast only surfaced to eat. After the red dragon wrapped up the fight, it handed Naoki one of its scales like a precious thanks. Then it curled back into its slumber, and Naoki realized the truth. If he planned to use monsters like this later, he'd better handle every one of them with serious caution. Now he's sprinting toward the shipyard to start his quest, and right along the way, he took charge of his parents, guiding them to the stairs and telling them, step by step, to go down. They kept strolling along a path by the beach, and Naoki soaked up the sunshine like it was perfect, until that weird feeling slammed back into him, and his mind started racing. Soon, they burst into the shipyard and told the guards at the gate he'd come to clean house and wipe out the Alliance. They ushered him in, and Barak, the shipyard's owner, lit up with a warm welcome, telling them they'd finally made it. He offered to guide them around, but Naoki clocked how rushed Barak was with the cleaning, and Barak admitted it too. Right now, they're in the middle of building a ship. Naoki's jaw drops at the ship's massive size, and he plots his next move: grab a small boat and make his escape. The worker swore that Barak hammered his whole life into this shipyard, that every beam and every ship here was forged by his non-stop drive for quality. Then Barak barked at the man to get back to work, shutting him down mid-sentence. He told them, "Once you step into my office, I'll fill you in on that request." And Naoki instantly got why Barak was sprinting, because the whole place looked less like an office and more like a battered, run-down storage warehouse that had been running for years, without anyone ever bothering to clean it. Barak rushed into the office, demanded a moment to explain everything, because this job was the last thing anyone could call boring. His hand bumped the cup by accident, and it tipped into a free fall. But Naoki shot out his arm, grabbed it in time, and saved it from shattering. Naoki tried to blurt out a thank you for cleaning up the mess, but Barak suddenly roared, warning them to watch their step, because every single thing in this room mattered. Naoki rushed up to Barak and apologized, promising he'd be more careful from now on. Then Barak finally clocked it. He'd gone too far earlier. So Barak shot back an apology for snapping, admitting they can get offended way too easily when they're working. That's why this room is such a disaster. Only guys are working here, and once they get obsessed with boats, tidiness goes out the window. So he begged the guild for help, but before Naoki even showed up, nobody wanted to touch this huge mess and clean it all up. Barak asked Naoki if it was cool to have him start cleaning right away, and Naoki snapped back that yeah, he could do it, though wiping out the whole office would take a few days. They locked in a time, and then Naoki dove in like a wrecking crew, insisting they'd need real dedication, because anything less just wouldn't cut it here. After work, Naoki finally hit a wave of exhaustion for the first time, standing there to tell them the first day of work was officially over. Then they finally linked up on the guild's island, and he leaned in to ask how the shipyard was going, before both of them spilled everything about their day. Naoki caught Ael's words and realized he'd just won the arena to test his fresh skills. Then he sold the scale and told her again, like it mattered. He's a legendary adventurer, and even when he's strong enough to crush his foe, he still smirks like everything's totally fine between them, until Ael drops a bombshell about a boat ticket as the prize, and that ticket is brutally hard to get. Naoki can't shake the idea that Ael chose the boat on purpose, because once you've got a boat, time burns fast, and that means they'll be forced to split up again right after that precious reunion. Naoki can't stop wondering what's wrong with her, then she suddenly snaps, lower your head, and rush in to apologize for humiliating him earlier, because she knows a servant must never force her master to bow his head, and she'll swallow any punishment that comes for her mistake. Naoki shakes his head and tells her she doesn't need his permission. If she wants to speak up, she can, no matter who she is or what her status says. He shoots back that posting it could wreck Naoki's reputation or scare clients into pulling their requests, but Naoki reassures her it'll be totally fine. She has nothing to worry about. Instead of making excuses, she straight up apologizes ahead of time if she tanks it, because she's locked in to give everything her all, and Naoki knows that's just the way she is. Then he demanded she say something, anything, and said if it'll help them work better, she should talk now, because Naoki really did treat him like he mattered too, and that brought that weird, unsettling feeling crashing back. Naoki added that Boruc apologized on the spot right after all that, proving he wasn't a bad guy at all. Then Isle said she'd jump in and help tomorrow too. The very next day, all three of them marched to the shipyard, and every worker there, Boruc included, went wide-eyed in shock when they finally saw the hunt from yesterday came back loaded with success, and she finally cleaned everything up when she reached the tellside. When she stumbled into the kitchen, her eyes landed on a sink packed with dirty dishes, and she snapped, shaking as if she'd be stuck working forever. And she grabbed the dishes and started scrubbing them clean. After a while, the whole kitchen gleamed so hard people stared. Shipyard workers couldn't believe how spotless it was. Then Boruc stormed in and punched them for being lazy during working hours. But the second he saw what those so-called lazy people were doing, his jaw hit the floor in pure, jaw-dropping shock. Then Isle finally showed up, swept in with a warm hello, and checked on Tell as she spoke. She scrubbed the filthy bags, then hauled the whole load with one hand like it was nothing. Chief Boruc's eyes widened and a grin cracked across his face, because this wasn't just tasty, it meant everyone was working faster too. He froze for a breath, wondering if it was finally safe for him to trust it. Then he nodded hard. Right then, Kamuro Naoki stepped in and joined the dinner with the rest. All of them shoved food in their mouths, stuffing it down like they couldn't wait another second. They dug into that delicious food they'd never tasted before, and Kamuro Naoki praised them again like he always did. After a while, Kamuro Naoki finally heard a voice spinning him a tale, while Chief Boruc's head lit into him for always leaving his own mess behind, saying he needed to set the standard for everyone. Then, Chief Boruc turned around and said he'd help clean up too, and Kamuro Naoki couldn't shake the feeling that both of them looked like they were getting dragged around by their own wives. And in that moment, it hit him. Maybe they really looked like a family, and the word family kept echoing in his head, so he couldn't help wondering if he'd steal some of their time. Still, they pushed through their work for an entire week, and by the end, they were getting closer and closer to the chairman and his employees. The very next morning, Kamuro Naoki and Isle geared up to leave, after they hugged everyone goodbye. I'll point out that she might cook for them once, because they keep pushing for it. And our protagonist's eyes lit up the moment he arrived, until he met the head of the workers, who stared from the corner of the wall and motioned for Kamuro Naoki to calm down. Kamuro Naoki glanced at what they were pointing at, and there, standing right beside Chief Boruc, the tribal chief, was the man they came for. The workers swore there was real peace between Tell and Chief Boruc, so he leaned in and asked Kamuro Naoki for more time. Kamuro Naoki didn't mind one bit. Then Isle barrels in and latches onto him, shouting where Kamuro Naoki went, and before he can even breathe, he gets shoved forward, because he and she already told head Chief Boruc, and now Kamuro Naoki is clearly not having it. But the moment they realize he's here, both of them clock him, and he can't just slip away. Everyone else is crushed by the mess they made. So Kamuro Naoki steps up to explain, and they just stand there together as the warm sea breeze keeps washing over them. The workers snap at Aile to stay silent this round, and she turns to Kamuro Naoki and blurts that head Chief Boruc proposed to her. He's stunned by the truth. Then when he tries to congratulate her, she cuts in and spills her real feelings. Confusion hit her hard. She'd been a mansion slave for most of her life, and now she was old, with no idea how to face what came next. She's terrified she can't make it out there, so she grabs him and asks, "Do you remember the very first day we arrived in the outside world?" And she was the first to whip up the food, while he'd always shoot back yes, say he was busy, then leave it waiting on the dining table, which she'd cling to for a while and then toss aside. But the moment Kamuro Naoki praised her cooking, it hit her, pure, real happiness at last. Kamuro Naoki grins at the news, and just a minute later, everyone else spots them too. He barrels toward Chief Borek, flashes a grin, then pulls out a little box, opens it, and boom, an engagement ring shines inside. Tell's heart swells with joy as he reaches out for her hand, and everyone's left staring, shocked at how perfectly everything has worked out for both of them. She lit up when she saw the one who loved her, just like she'd been promised, because a minute earlier Kamuro Naoki had torn her out of slavery, and he now told her he was bursting with joy to watch her begin a new life that mirrored how she first entered this world, swearing that she could forge beautiful new memories and finally repay every painful thing she'd suffered as a slave. And once she heard it, her joy exploded, and now she was finally engaged to Chief Borek. Everyone erupted with cheers for the couple, and earlier, when our protagonist told her all about her and confessed his feelings, Tell practically glowed with happiness. She sobbed tears of joy, overwhelmed with gratitude for Kamuro Naoki, because he'd given her this life. And when that thank you finally hit her heart, he waved goodbye and headed on, letting her follow her way. Ale grilled Naoki, asking if he was really sure he wanted to bail this fast. Naoki snapped back that he'd already said goodbye, so yeah, it was time to go. Then Kamuro Naoki turned to her and asked if she was really ready to hand over his ticket, and he insisted it was only a backup for their trip, just in case our hero couldn't snag a boat. But still, he gave it to her, treating it like a perfect wedding gift for her. And now she leaned in and asked our hero if he was worried about Tell. Kamuro Naoki just muttered back that he wasn't worried one bit, because he knew Chief Borek would take care of her, and that she'd be smiling for the rest of her life. When he said that, relief hit her like a wave, and she couldn't help but blink at the fact that even the chef was hungry for love. She started to wonder if this was happening only to her and Kamuro Naoki, and then she thought about what Isle warned him. Maybe they'd get paired up. Still, she clenched her resolve, kept walking without him, and chose to read that as the sign they were moving on. Isle lunged at Naoki and barked, "Why are you pushing so hard?" Then she turned it around. "Can't you just let it go?" And that was that. But our protagonist suddenly remembered he forgot to ask Chief Borek about the boat, and now he can't just run back because they already said goodbye. The next morning at the inn, right after they'd seen Teloff and Isle had kept watch where he stayed, Kamuro Naoki showed up again with a bag clutched in his hand. He thought about using it to call Sarah and Baltsac, the duo he'd just been talking to, and reminded Isle that they were the team. Then he said goodbye to Incubania, because he also remembered how close both of them had been to our protagonist before. Meanwhile, Baltsac stood his post as a tomb guard, until a call crackled through the communication bag, and he snatched it up to hear Naoki's voice. From the other side, Kamuro Naoki told him it had already been a month, and hearing that energetic voice made him breathe again, because it meant he was alive and okay. Baltsac said everything was fine. Then Kamuro Naoki asked if Sarah was caught up in something, like he had warned him about earlier, but Baltsac didn't reply. Then, boom, Sarah slammed him with a loud call at the exact same time, asking whether she was talking to our protagonist. He told her he'd call back later if she was busy, but she snapped that he better not hang up. He checked on her and she snapped back, "I'm not okay," because every single day she has to get through it without Kamuro Naoki. She misses him like crazy, and then he asked if her trip was going all right. Our protagonist told Sarah he'd started out traveling alone, but somehow his friend showed up right when she joined fast. She shot a question at him, "Is your friend a woman?" And the moment it left her mouth, nerves flickered across her face like a warning light. When he said it was a duo made up of a maid and a female soldier, Sarah couldn't hold her panic in and snapped at Kamuro Naoki to keep away from them, warning he could get tricked. Then Kamuro Naoki told her the maid had bilated on them the day before. That hit her like fireworks. She was cheering nonstop for that one, but then she popped right back up, demanding answers about the other person. And he said she might already recognize her since she used to be her instructor. She froze for a second, then burst out, "I remember her," and practically bragged the whole thing. She couldn't shake it off. After all, she was the one who sent her to the capital city of the island. And now she was waiting, craving a real thanks, a real show of gratitude. Sarah snapped that she was an exhibitionist, and she hated every second of it, so our protagonist couldn't fully disagree. Ale stared into the same fears. Then another idea struck, and she grinned like trouble incarnate. She began it with soft whispers. Then she feigned like Naoki was the one touching her, until the night women erupted, making noise and talking like Kamuro Naoki had just made his move. Sarah tried to act like she was going solo, until Kamuro Naoki snatched up his call bag, shot her a question, and she started to flash that smile as if nothing was up, and told him to do his best for now, while he stepped in to watch over our protagonist. Everything was on the verge of getting wiped out, so their transmission cut off mid-sentence. Our protagonist snapped at her for teasing like that again, promising he'd shut it down on his end too. Then everyone realized she was an exhibitionist. After that, she dashed to wash her face, and then it was time. Breakfast Island, here we come. And if he really wanted to do it, I told him, "'Cause I'm always ready when the time comes." Our heroine choked on shame and snapped that he had zero intention of endangering that woman, because he felt nothing at all. Then, right after that, Kamuro Naoki couldn't escape it. Sarah kept calling, and she grilled him every single second. They were still stuck in the inn when Naoki leaned in and asked Ale if she knew anyone who really understood monsters. Then he watched her like, "So, why are you suddenly getting interested in her?" He just needed to find out if anyone actually knew monsters inside and out. Someone doing real research. Because yeah, he'd heard for a fact there were monster scholars out there. Then Kamuro Naoki admitted he only knows a few of them right now, like Mazmaskal, Vespa Hornet, Bugroach, and the Red Dragon. And they're nothing like the pests he's dealt with before. So with the crossing of the sea coming up, they could be staring down even more brutal monsters. So he decides it'll hit harder if they bring along a monster scholar. And he's already gearing up to drop the rumor that a giant creature is stalking the other side of the sea. Thinking about that lurking monster danger thrills him, and that wild excitement instantly makes Kamuro Naoki feel a little on edge. Ale leaned in and told him she knows a monster scholar living right here in the city, then asked if he wanted to meet her, only to add that she's probably dealing with a ton of stuff right now because her aunt already knows the monster scholar's name, Belsa, and everyone remembers she's the former lord's daughter who ran this land like a pro, before the whole town caught on and started treating her like a living celebrity. She figures she'll have to crack it on her own, so the very next day, our protagonist rushes over to Belsa's house. When he finally gets there, he spots an old stone house wobbling on the edge of collapse, knocks hard on the door, and hears a weak voice from inside. But nobody dares to open it. Then he leans in, slips a look into the living room, and there it is. Moldy bread and the one he's hunting, Belsa. She looks like she's seconds from dying, so he blurts, "Are you okay?" the moment he realizes what's happening. After that, Kamuro fired up the food and she devoured it like she hadn't eaten in days, so fast that some of it even snagged in her throat. Kamuro Naoki immediately shoved her water and asked if she could talk like a normal person now. The second she took a drink, Belsa nodded. Yes, she couldn't stop smiling as she thanked him for that mouth-watering meal. She swore she'd almost starved to death, and told him she was grateful Kamuro Naoki showed up just when she needed it, like a miracle. But it was her first time pulling something like this off, so she fixed her eyes on Kamuro's face and blurted, "So, who are you?" They traded introductions, and Kamuro Naoki swung open the nearby room for her. Then once Belsa finally got why Naoki came all this way, it turned out her room was an absolute disaster. Messy, grime-caked, and totally unhygienic. Kamuro Naoki stared at the research room and couldn't believe it. full of monster scraps and even real research progress. Then she leaned in and admitted she'd renovated the place, folded it into her own research, and burned every last coin on it. So the past few days she was living with zero expenses to worry about. That's why he tracked her down like that, then threw out an apology, because she never believed he could actually help her. Kamuro Naoki leaned in and told her he could actually turn that into real money, because adventurers would pay up for someone like him, packed with monster knowledge, and he could even jump into an adventure party. She'd help scared adventurers face their monsters by teaching them exactly how to handle each one they feared, opening fresh job chances for Belsa, who'd been itching to do it for ages, but kept backing out because she truly believed everyone hated her. He didn't get what she meant, so he pushed the issue and asked if they could get enough funding to keep this place running and let her research continue. And when she said yes, he threw himself into his magical lifestyle, cleaning and tidying everything until Belsa's eyes widened at how suddenly neat and effortless her place felt. And he even upped the game, stepping up to sponsor her himself. Belsa never thought anyone would fund her, but then Kamuro Naoki showed up, ready to pay for her research and come back to see the results. Plus, he even handed her samples, and suddenly it felt like she was living her dream. Now, Kamuro Naoki tossed her 5 nados as a starter, and that's basically 500 yen in her hands. She hesitated to take it, but he broke it down for her. The monster's research was basically a never-ending road, and if she wanted a clean result, she'd never hit the expectations. Then he snapped that he wasn't saying any of this to anyone, not even to make it sound nice, except for him. Kamuro Naoki then caught her off guard, saying it would all be okay because Kamuro Naoki was doing all of it out of raw curiosity, because if they could learn something useful to wipe out that monster, it was worth every risk. So he decided to try, and Versa leaned in, asking if he was really sure. Naoki just nodded and backed his choice without hesitation. Versa lit up with joy because now he could dive right back into his work. He leaned in and blurted, "All right, let's kick things off with this." And at the very end of the day, Komodo Naoki slipped back there, then came back to his lodging at night. Next morning, they locked in a tight routine, researching and running experiments on the monster, while he stayed ready to be their guinea pig, even handling the monster testing and cooking on top of it. He watched her grind through her research all day, while he scored more specimens for his work. Versa loved seeing her progress, and Kamuro Naoki couldn't help smiling because she was finally having fun. She threw herself back into work, kept grinding on her research, and when cooking time never came, she powered through with food prep instead. He cooked up delicious meals for her, and it became their daily ritual, because Versa was always starving. One day, Kamuro Naoki casually asked her what sparked her dream of becoming a monster scholar, and once again, he stared in disbelief at how flawlessly she handled monster carcasses. She shrugged and said she'd always been drawn to monsters, and the rest just unfolded from there. Then she gazed out the window, stunned that 5 whole years had already slipped by. When Versa was drowning in depression and couldn't even bring herself to move, just slumped in the corner, numb and silent, someone stepped up and told her to take up her father's will and legacy, for her sake and for the whole town's future. Those words lit the fuse, and that's how she became who she is today. He leaned in and told her her father used to rule this place, and once he retired, he handed the job to the lieutenant of that time, now Lord Kamuro Naoki. She remembered Isle had hinted at it too, and he went on to say the current lord sounded like a genuinely good man. Versa nodded and said he really did seem like a good person, and once breakfast was done, she swept back to her experiments. Meanwhile, a creepy hooded watcher seemed to lurk near her home, and he spilled every detail to the lord in charge. As soon as he arrived, he rushed to the head servant and told the lord everything. "Yes, lord, it's been happening for days. Versa has been visited by a mystery man, Kamuro Naoki, and now he's been helping her with her research too, so her work is firing back up again." The lord fumed at the report, snapping that they should have let her die. then ordered the head servant to drag both Kamuro Naoki and Versa straight to him. And the head servant finally snapped. So what do we do about her research? But the Lord didn't care at all, ordering a midnight hit, burn her house down and torch every scrap of her work. Then night rolled in, and by evening, the building where Versa's home sat went up in flames. The next morning, Kamuro Naoki was knocked out cold when someone smashed into his room and yanked him awake. So he shot up and demanded, "What's going on? Why all this noise so early?" The moment they told Kamuro Naoki about the fire at House Versa, his sleepiness vanished like smoke, and he sprinted straight to House Versa. But then, right in the middle of his journey, a terrifying sight stopped him cold. Soldiers snapped their swords toward his chest and shouted that he'd betrayed the kingdom. The soldiers swore that if he hadn't stirred them up, Versa's house never would have gone up in flames. Then they snatched Kamuro Naoki and left him reeling, trapped wondering what they were planning to do to him. Since they kidnapped him, he had no time to react, so he lunged his hand toward his sword. He shoved the weapon toward them, and with that tiny push, the soldiers couldn't even budge. Kamuro Naoki blew the whistle and warned them they had to start spilling every detail. With a stone-cold look on his face, he sprinted straight for the city, charging toward the house of Versa. They pushed inside and stared at the chaos, people packed in front of House of Versa, while Kamuro Naoki marched through, clocking just how bad things really were. And when he finally got there, the situation didn't just stink. It was 10 times worse. They couldn't believe it. House of Versa was wiped clean, with only a few stone walls still standing, and everything else reduced to ashes. Then the crowd there grilled Kamuro Naoki, and when he nodded along, they told him the truth. After tearing through the ruins, they couldn't find Versa anywhere. Another man stepped in and said he'd seen figures sneaking around the night before, rushing in, and he swore he watched Versa get dragged away. The head servant snapped, demanding to know who those men really were. The butler straight up said, "I'm the Lord's personal head servant, the same one who once ruled the arena as a champion." And still, everyone insisted, there's no way you could stop the kidnapping. Versa remembered telling everyone in town that they hated him, and now it didn't add up. Because the way folks looked at him, they were scared for him, not disgusted, so he straight up asked, "Don't you hate me?" And when he paused, they exchanged glances. They admitted they still couldn't shake what happened 5 years ago, and said he used to be totally immature, until Kamuro Naoki practically ordered him to take a rest. They jammed it with what Kamuro Naoki and Isle were doing, wasting not a second. At last they headed for their lord's house, and there it was, staring them in the face beyond a wide-open gate. Right away, a voice snapped, "Stop," because nobody could step inside without permission. That voice belonged to a man who looked just like the one the head servant had described to them. So Kamuro Naoki instantly understood what they were trying to do. Ale snapped into action as soon as he heard about the head servant, grinning like this was a golden chance. Maybe the butler could be a real opponent. So he started marching for the gate and asked. Naoki shot a question to the head servant. "Is Versa here?" But the servant shut him down cold, warning Naoki that if he barged in without permission, he'd be treated like a trespasser, and that butler would handle the fallout. Kamuro Naoki fumed to himself. Keeping that gate wide open after he told them to stay outside felt like the head servant was daring them on purpose. Kamuro Naoki snapped with rage at this guy, then stormed in to see what was going on for himself, straight through the gate. Then the head servant yanked out his dagger and hurled it straight at him. Kamuro Naoki didn't so much as flinch, because his ally's power was the kind that swallowed fear whole. He swung his sword and smashed the dagger's strike aside. Ale warned he'd keep his guard up against Butler as long as he still had the chance. Kamuro Naoki thanked him, then let her move forward through the mansion. But the servant who got clipped only assumed Kamuro Naoki was helpless since he never reacted, so he figured only Ale could be trouble. Then he let her pass. Right after Kamuro Naoki reached the mansion gate, he kicked on his detection instincts and instantly clocked it. The inside was packed with people, all of them clearly waiting for the intruders. With 2 figures waiting deep in the back room, probably Versa and Lord, he slipped into the house first, hunting for that first intruder. As the servant slammed into the ale, fighting it tooth and nail, the servant leaned in and told Ale, "We're not getting you out alive, because we've been shadowing Versa non-stop, and we know Kamuro Naoki and you would come." The servant leaned in and warned him. This mansion was crawling with scoundrels, and one of them could easily snatch Kamuro Naoki the second he showed up. He cackled, leaned on the butler, and basically bragged that letting our protagonist inside only proved they never had a shot. Then it hit him. It was the first time he'd ever seen Kamuro Naoki go this aggressively. So right now, in this whole world, there was literally nobody who could stop our protagonist. Standing over the defeated scoundrels and our protagonist, he charged for the back room where the Lord kept Versa hostage, then burst inside and slammed him with a shocking fireball. It hit like a full-on assault straight to the soul. Even after Kamuro Naoki burst through it unscathed, he still couldn't believe his attack didn't land. While he was secretly relieved his clothes stayed totally intact. He turned to Versa and asked if she was okay, and once she confirmed she was fine, she shot back, demanding why he'd come here and risk his life. She also spilled about a brutal fire that tore through her home and the area before she even woke up. Then she looked around and found herself here. The Lord snapped at him with pure rage, and Naoki instantly realized. He never told Versa a single thing. Right from the start, our protagonist knew Lord was hunting both Versa and him. Because if even one walked away alive, the public would learn about his crimes, and his mask would rip off. He even heard the same warning from a servant Lord sent straight into his ears. But he didn't believe a word. He beat them up and hauled them all into custody. All Kamuro Naoki did was blast the truth, loud enough to shake the room, telling everyone this wasn't the man they thought he was, that he'd masterminded the whole thing, driven the former Lord into retirement and exploited him while he was at his weakest. Versa stayed frozen in shock, then our protagonist laid it out. The reason Versa felt satisfied was because he was just chasing his own agenda, and when it hit, Versa roared at the Lord to admit it, right there. No excuses, no defense. He locked eyes with Kamuro Naoki, who just stood there stone cold as he felt himself get boxed in. He blared out everything he believed, even his own hard truth. 5 years back, lava from the nearby mountain crashed into the city, slaughtering lives and ripping everything apart. Yet Versa's father at the time cared so much, he emptied his own pockets to rebuild the damage and help people get back on their feet. On the day the caravan finally delivered valuable supplies to the attacked people, one brutal incident shattered everything. So the supplies never reached them. Trust in Versa's father collapsed overnight, and he was forced to abandon his post, clearing the way for him to become the next Lord. And that's why the anger didn't stop. It slammed into his daughter Versa, and the attacks on her only got louder. Versa finally demanded answers from Lord. Why didn't he stand up for her back then, when he was the one who ordered her to become a monster scholar? He told her that planting the idea of becoming a monster scholar was just a mask, because in truth, all he wanted was Belsa dead, and he needed it to leave no trail back to him. So that's why he pushed her into becoming a monster scholar. She clung to the grim hope that one day, while hunting specimens and dodging anyone's suspicion, she'd finally end up dead. He threw all of this at her because Versa was the previous god's daughter, and he feared she'd someday try to steal his throne. So he rigged everything, starving her into death. But then strangers crashed in out of nowhere and rallied behind her, and that's what broke him, forcing him to stop playing games and strike for real this time. Versa got hit again and again by a brutal truth, thorn after thorn, until despair swallowed him whole. While Kamuro Naoki stood behind him, furious that it couldn't end this way, he ripped into the coward, someone who'd been waiting for 5 whole years for Versa to finally die. Then Versa muttered that she wanted out of this hellhole, and Kamuro Naoki yanked her through the chaos while shouting, "It's not finished." If she turned him down, it'd be betrayal, and the whole kingdom would come hunting them. While the elites who were forged at the Magic Academy in the capital stood there, Kamuro Naoki suddenly snapped up his courage, claiming he was free to go after her anytime she wanted, leaving her completely stunned. And Kamuro Naoki finally understood that if he so much as tried to act against him, he'd shut him down because that threat wasn't empty. It was his. So he stood there, head bowed, while Kamuro Naoki hauled Versa out. After that, she froze in her tracks toward Kamuro Naoki, stunned, then burst into laughter as soon as she heard his words before she walked off, realizing how stupid she'd been for trusting the Lord and blindly following everything up to now without a single question. Versa could have been lying. Naive as she was, she still understood the word fool all too well, because Kamuro Naoki just stood there and let Versa unload her rage while she realized her home was gone for good, her research wiped out completely, and her world finally collapsed into nothing. She broke down in tears because she'd lost everything, and now she couldn't find a single thing left to save herself. Right as she was about to reach out her hand and tell him she could go with him, Versa choked on her tears and stopped. He almost reached for her hand too, but something kept him from it. Kamuro Naoki caught that feeling instantly, then leaned in and asked her straight up if she was scared to trust someone again, or was she already bracing for the sting of betrayal all over again? Versa couldn't pretend she didn't know it. Then our protagonist snapped into it. If he really wanted to take charge of this case, he'd have to act on his own and choose exactly what he was going to do. He told her she had her own set of circumstances, that she'd only just slipped into this world a short while ago, starting with nothing at all. And somehow she still kept surviving, even after she managed to beat the current head servant, one of the friends she'd picked up along the road. Yeah, she lost a lot of things, but she never regretted a single bit of it, because every scar and struggle had already turned into experience. So she decided everything on her own. Then she leaned in and asked Belsa if he'd be willing to try, her eyes practically begging him to say yes. After that, Versa snapped her head up and nodded instantly. She was all in with Kamuro Naoki, and she couldn't hide how thrilled she was to finally get a new ally. A week later, they finally hit the port. Right as Chief Barak handed them a small boat, and with his workers pitching in, made sure they were ready to set off. Versa was ready to bolt out of there with no trouble at all, while the city's people cringed at the fury they'd unleashed on her. Once everything was finally in place, Kamuro Naoki stepped into the shipyard and the whole crew greeted him with warm smiles. He nodded back, thanking everyone for turning his time here into something truly enjoyable. With that, they climbed onto the boat, engines roaring, and shot off to the next destination. Everyone prayed the road ahead would stay safe and kind. But just a few days later, Kamuro Naoki finally set foot on an island that screamed danger the moment he saw it, and he couldn't stop asking himself, how are they supposed to keep going here when the monsters are bigger than anything they faced before? Kamuro Naoki, the one fate picked out for him, even after he was already gone. He's the one out there, grinding non-stop in pest control. Then life throws him a second chance, but he doesn't change one bit, kicking off this wild journey to a new world where opportunities hit like lightning and only come once. After blasting across the ocean, they crashed onto a wild island where dense forests swallowed everything in sight. The island was bursting with life, roaring with huge wild boars that were bigger than anything they'd ever seen before. Kamuro Naoki even said they looked dangerous and terrifying, but he didn't flinch one bit when it came time to handle them. Versa insisted that an adult wild boar should max out at around 2 meters tall, but on this island the numbers went totally off the rails, and it freaked him out. He couldn't stop worrying about their safety as he kept digging into his research. But Versa was the only one buzzing with excitement to charge into the monster fight, while Kamuro Naoki was the only one who still looked completely sane among them. So we wrestled them under control. Then a whole swarm of monsters came sprinting at them, and the girl clammed up, acting just like a kid staring at animals at the zoo. She told Isle she'd test the new rat poison spray, and she begged to join the hunt, too. And when she did, Versa's eyes went wide because Isle and the other guy were both insanely strong. Kamuro Naoki let out a heavy sigh as they pushed onward, finally getting his chance to test rat poison on the Mazmaskal. Then he peppered everyone with one question. Were there any wild animals left on this island? When they said yes, He shook his head like a cold-blooded hunter and claimed he'd wiped them all out. Versa started to feel it. Something was asterisk off about this place, like the island itself was reshaping monsters into something new. Naoki figured the island could have evolved on its own too, the same way water snakes and land snakes changed with their surroundings. And when Versa said he was still blown away by how monsters could evolve like that, you could hear the awe in his voice. And if a whole pack of monsters ever got whittled down, the rest would break formation, scatter, and scramble to escape, except this time. Because when one of them got taken out, more attackers surged in, like someone was yanking them by strings, and Naoki Kimuro swears the only way it makes sense is if they're being controlled, because every monster charges from the exact same direction, and then it hits him. The scholar monsters can spot something different than normal people. Kimuro Naoki can't wait to dig into where these monsters come from. Maybe he'll finally crack the island's secret. He's thrilled to bury the nightmare from his past life, and right now, he's happier than ever. Even if this darker side is dangerous as hell, he steps into it freely, with zero fear of what's waiting. As he rockets forward, Kimuro Naoki grabs him from behind. Boom. I swear he said to make him do stuff, but Naoki's just trying to let him go. He knows it's risky, so the threat is going to land on him, not the other guy. And right ahead, Kimuro Naoki is scrambling at full speed, trying to keep both of these lunatics alive while holding Versa down and keeping her tied up. He snaps at her to stay sharp, or he'll send him right back to the port. The three of them press on, still hunting the island's secrets as they go. They crash into a giant snake. One savage swing from his sword cuts it down instantly. And as they keep mowing through those ordinary people, Kimuro Naoki feels trapped like he's pacing through a half-buried underground prison with a forest growing over it, until their eyes lock onto a lonely house right in the middle of the chaos. Kimuro Naoki decides to get close and boom, he realizes they're surrounded. With his sharp detection skills, he clocks the distance, about 10 inches out, and it doesn't take long to figure out who's behind it, the archer who fired at them. And Kimuro Naoki told me to take it from here. He'd already warned him that someone could pop him from far away. But then he smiled and said he'd be fine, because there were only 10 people left. He stepped into the sky, and somehow his feet stayed floating there, like the air itself had turned into a solid foothold. Isle pressed him on it, and the question caught him off guard, but he still snapped back that he figured he couldn't use magic. Then she shot back, reminding him that he'd pulled this exact skill off even during his progress test. She told him clear as thunder that he wasn't only a fighter, he was a magical warrior too. Our protagonist suddenly couldn't wrap his head around it. Why was he getting famous all of a sudden? As Ailes dropped from his aerial perch to handle the archers, and he tore across the sky at the same speed, he moved on the ground. And just like that, the archers couldn't nail their shots when he barreled in with a brutal, powerful strike. While Naoki and Versa watched the nostalgia unfold, Ailes started tearing through the archers, dropping them one after another. The attackers slipped into the trees, and Kimuro Naoki crept up. Then he watched something drop from the branches, tumbling down like a shaken apple. After he finished tending to everyone, he'd return, and our protagonist lit up as he thanked him, because he truly loved the help. After that he praised her, and Versa, still smiling, blurted out, "So, are you on a date?" Our protagonist's mood dropped in an instant. He shot it down hard, swearing that would never happen. In the hallway, the attacker crumbled, spun around and bolted straight for the house, shouting "Master," begging him to remember how insanely strong this intruder is, and asking what in the world is going on. Kimuro Naoki tailed them straight to the backyard, and Versa snapped, "Are those people ghosts?" The rumors claimed something inhuman, some kind of monster. But our protagonist's curiosity hit hard because he couldn't wait to find out why they could swing human weapons. He stomped into the backyard, peered through the window, and boom, there it was. A perfectly normal house inside, down to a calendar hanging on the wall. It looked like nothing from this world, and once he strode toward the backyard, there it was. A well. And Kimuro Naoki couldn't stop wondering who, in the world, lived down there. Right when he looked down into the well, A head shot up and smashed his chin so hard it rang, and both of them mumbled in Japanese before the newcomer froze in shock, realizing Kamuro Naoki had been asking about another world just like him. Our protagonist demanded to know how anyone could tell he was from another world, and he pushed for a simple explanation. He marched up and introduced himself to everyone like they were all in on the same secret, and then dropped the bomb that he wasn't just anyone. He was another guy from another world, just like Naoki. Later on, Kamuro Naoki finally gets the full picture of Marquez's job. He runs the dungeon master's underground prison. Marquez has a round belly, a huge nose, and big wide eyes topped with curly hair. Naoki Kamuro could feel his familiar presence in the air, and it sent a rush of excitement through him, like a tight fist closing around his chest. And once he finally reached Marquez's house, the joy didn't stick, because Marquez and Versa started chatting non-stop about the underground prison, pulling him straight into their world. He realized the underground prison wasn't just a cage. It was basically an automatic monster factory. Kamuro Naoki felt sick to his stomach as they kept talking, because none of it clicked. He couldn't grasp a single thing about the dungeon's core or anything else, and when Versa finally asked, "Where did you start losing it?" he had no idea what to say. And then, with a shaky voice, he finally admitted he hadn't gotten anything from the very start. Versa realized she'd have to burn a ton of time and money just to make him get it, and Kamuro Naoki finally understood the underground space was basically a cave packed with demon creatures. But the rest totally flew over his head, like what those sub-rooms were for and the other requirements. So she grabbed him and asked, "So you get it now, or not?" Then he clamped down on his pride, forcing himself to follow Versa's instructions to the letter, though Isle still couldn't wrap her head around it. She had secretly been listening the whole time, but the second Versa and the others turned to Ale was already out cold, fast asleep. He insisted it was all because Versa had started tagging along with him lately, so he couldn't make sense of what everyone was saying. Then he snapped at her for being rude, noticing how damn close they were acting, and Kamuro Naoki only said he'd understand more once he saw the underground room afterward. Marquez demanded to know if they truly had to march into the dungeon and hash it out with the other worlders, Kamuro Naoki and the rest, who were absolutely stunned the moment they stepped forward. They pushed deeper into Marquez's place until Marquez swung open the passage and showed them the entrance to the underground prison. Kamuro Naoki froze, staring at that massive desert sky and horizon, while the blazing sun blasted roaring, hellish sounds straight at the monsters living out there like it was their home. It was the first time Kamuro Naoki had ever laid eyes on monsters like these, and he was blown away, pure awe. Everything changed the moment he stepped into the Red Dragon Cave, because the underground prison wasn't just part of the world, it was its own hidden space. And right then Marquez started training him and the others on how that prison really worked. So massive it felt like an entire second world had swallowed them whole. Back then, Kamuro Naoki told Marquez to hold up while he grabbed a pen and notebook to scribble notes. Then his mind went blank, and he couldn't recall most of what Marquez said. But the moment they kept tailing him, Naoki's imagination went wild, because he finally realized that this underground hideout wasn't one single place at all, but a maze of rooms where the weather changed on a dime. Right at the underground prison's lowest heart sat a colossal magic stone. The whole place ran on it, and it demanded mana to stay alive. Marquez kept hunting through monster after monster, cracking them open for mana stones and shoveling them into the core like fuel. Then Kamuro Naoki leaned in and asked, "So what exactly are mana stones?" Marquez shot back that those mana stones were the giveaway, hidden inside a monster's body. So yeah, you could spot the monsters just by hunting for them. Then Versa leaned in and grilled Marquez for answers to everything else. She whipped out a book named *** Lisa's Monster Notebook and showed it to Marquez. Then he claimed it was penned by his mentor, **Lisa**. Inside it, someone had scribbled that the underground prison's core could spawn monsters with no mana stones at all. Then those monsters devoured a portion of a mana stone, and bit by bit, forged it right inside their own bodies. Marquez leaned in and told him this was close to the truth, and Versa practically burst with excitement. Good news kept rolling in, with the demon animal research finally moving the right way. Then Marquez also pushed Kamuro Naoki, insisting their dead enemy, Mazmaskal, had to be sitting on the mana stone. Stone after stone, they'd stash it away, and later they'd haul it back to feed the core of that underground prison. Their theories were finally clicking, except for our guy, Kamuro Naoki, who had zero clue what they were even talking about. So he figured he'd wait until later and make Versa explain it all. Suddenly, Versa crumpled and fainted, and he couldn't move a muscle in that brutal heat. Kamuro Naoki figured she'd pushed herself too far, too fast, from sheer excitement and exhaustion, and he was already planning to ask if he could stay here for a while. He didn't just want to fight. He wanted to measure his strength against these monsters, and Marquez gave him the green light to go all out as much as he pleased. So that's exactly what he chased. Isle, panicking for our protagonist, called him over and pressed extra clothes into his hands, gear he could actually use to stay safe. He guessed these clothes might keep him safe, and the thought made Isle beam so hard she could barely contain it. Then she demanded what flipped in him, and he just shrugged, saying he didn't know why it happened. Once Versa finally cooled down, Marquez and Kamuro Naoki headed back home, and then he heard the wildest rumor. There was a plantation under the well. So he checked for himself, climbed down inside, and the moment he saw that tea plantation, he never saw it coming, because our protagonist couldn't even dream that something that massive, a whole plantation, could be hiding underground. He asked Marquez if he could help arrange the place, and Marquez just shrugged. "I've been alive for 300 years. That number blew Kamuro Naoki's mind. He couldn't believe how much time Marquez had to pull off all those wild surprises. Marquez apologized for not saying it sooner, then hit him with the real reason. He was here to take down the Demon King, because that monster used to be his hero. He and his best friend set off on a brutal quest to take down the Demon King. He was insanely powerful, and his elf partner adored him. Even his existence was guarded by rock-solid defense and brutal combat skills, and the way he learned new techniques matched that same strength. Then, one day, a skilled tree called ** Eternal Body materialized right before him, and he snatched it up without a second thought. Next thing he knew, his body was locked into ** Immortality **. Marquez brewed tea for our protagonist, then snapped a warning, "Careful. It's still burning hot." Out of nowhere, an arrow slammed down from behind and pinned the table. He yelped in shock and accidentally tipped his tea everywhere. The arrow's shooter wasn't a mystery anymore. Turns out it was the same ghost. Then they loosed another arrow, straight into Marquez's head, and the ghost's guilt crashed down instantly as Marquez collapsed, dead. Marquez snapped at them for calling Kamuro Naoki not an invader, insisting he was just a guest, and they caved and apologized on the spot. From that moment on, Kamuro Naoki stood there as proof that Marquez was real, destined to last forever. Then Marquez snapped at the ghost to brew tea for Kamuro Naoki as an apology, and they obeyed instantly. But the tea tasted awful, exactly like the ghosts planned, since they were trying to turn Kamuro Naoki into a ghost just like Mark. Kamuro Naoki snapped that he shouldn't have asked Geist Tylers for it in the first place, since their brewing was awful, utterly useless, and Marquez immediately ordered the ghosts to return to their place, and they obeyed like he was their master, with Kamuro noting that the ghosts were oddly attached to Marquez. Marquez shot back that it was just ghost mischief, couldn't even brew beer, and Kamuro Naoki suddenly felt something stirring, like a soft breeze sliding through the air, urging him to act. After trading words with Kamuro Naoki, Marquez finally learned the truth. Naoki arrived in this world with no clue what his role even was, so he tore across the globe, spending his time wrecking everything. Marquez felt a sting of jealousy about his story. Sometimes it hurt way more than his ever did. But when he looked back on those days, He couldn't help realizing the best moment of his whole life was when the two of them tilted their faces to the sky. Kamuro Naoki casually said his youth was going great. Marcus felt warmth flood his chest after hearing that, then nodded like there was no doubt. Because yeah, they both had lived through youth once, and even though his own was long gone, he could still vividly see those memories burning in his mind right now. Kamuro Naoki told Marquez he sounded like an old person, and Marquez couldn't even argue. Then Marquez opened his mouth and shocked him right back. Marquez warned him not to get tricked by flashy skills or big status, so even if it meant dropping ranks, do it. He told Kamuro Naoki that power and titles breed arrogance, and the heartbreak hit when he finally lost his friend. That loss carved an important lesson into Kamuro. The real strength isn't in your rank, it's in your heart, and you've got to stay strong. He fired a question at Kamuro Naoki. What would happen if you ripped the core out of the underground prison? And Naoki didn't hesitate. The whole prison would collapse and swallow every last thing inside. He confessed this happened to him years ago, back when he only cared about himself, until he erased who he really was and forgot why this heart mattered so much. But now, he finally gets a chance to tell it to the other world's inhabitants, and he warns them. If a bad feeling hits out of nowhere, remember what Marquez just told him. Right then, the Geist-Tylers came tearing through the air, screaming for their master. Marquez snapped, "Why are you all so loud this time?" And they spilled the truth. The snow foxes had exploded in number down in the lower area. Marquez's eyes lit up, and he asked Kamuro Naoki if he wanted to take the destruction request. Kamuro Naoki didn't hesitate, he agreed. Then he bolted back to Marquise's house to gear up for the destruction, and demanded to know why she was leaving in the middle of winter in that godforsaken area, where he spilled the details about the request he'd just gotten from Marquez. He asked if the two of them wanted in too. Versa shook her head, said she was out, and chose to read a book instead of freezing to death. Meanwhile, Isle, the king of battle-obsessed maniacs, said, "I'm in." "Okay," Naoki asked, "will you brave the colder regions in that outfit?" And Isle shot back, "It'll work out somehow." Then Kamuro Naoki blurted, "That's forbidden," as he watched them start gearing up. Mark suddenly remembered how those three looked just like his friend's stuff, and how he'd line it up and prep everything before every monster hunt. Then the memories hit him hard, and he started thinking way deeper. Then Kamuro Naoki kept hammering Marquez's phone over and over again, and asked if they could pause for a second before making the destruction request, because they still had to get things ready. Marquez nodded and told them it was fine. He'd welcome them any time. Kamuro Naoki was stunned. Marquez didn't even want to linger after a whole century. So Marquez laughed, said goodbye to prep today's meal, and skipped off toward the farm. He lit up seeing Marquez right beside him, grinning like everything was finally going their way. Then the countdown hit 0, and it was time to unleash the dungeon work and get started. They kicked things off by heading into the forest, hunting bears, and Ale sliced the hides clean off. Then Kamuro Naoki swung into action, using his skills to turn those bearskins into the perfect dress for her. Meanwhile, Versa hunched over his study desk, and on the other side Marquez was begging the ghosts for help, anything to whip up the best meal they could with everyone pitching in. So the spirits hauled in the ingredients, stashed them away, and worked like mad to build the feast. Mark stayed right on top of everything, kept a close eye on them, and even jumped into the kitchen to cook himself. Kamuro Naoki marched up to Marquez and told him, "We're set, let's go now." Then he grilled Marquez one more time. The midwinter zone really was under the mushroom's control, as that magical mushroom energy latched onto people, animals, and monsters alike. It sparked a brutal environmental cycle that kept everything trapped in its web. Kamuro Naoki and Isle were getting their winter dresses ready, and Marquez stared in awe at how wildly creative they were with winter clothing here. Plus, he had to admit those clothes are seriously warm, and he even explained how this cloak would be made. It doesn't just trap the heat, it also masks the human scent he clings to, because that huge, magically beefed-up fur can stash far more than it ever looks like. And Marquez said it wouldn't be surprising if a full-on war erupted over this bag, because it's a real artifact-class item, and she's practically glowing with excitement since she finally owns it. Now she and the others are set to rush into the winter area, and before they can even catch their breath, a wild snowstorm slams down, freezing every single thing solid. Kamuro Naoki still can't get used to how unreal the snow-filled underground space is around here. Snow buries him up to his knees, the storm wrecks his sight, and then they finally spot a snow fox. And it's exactly like they said. Kamuro Naoki orders Ale to strike, and then, out of nowhere, everything goes off the rails. That night the food hit the table, but his drink was already gone. Ale had drained it in a rage, as if anger could be chugged away. Kamuro Naoki warned him, "Don't overdo the drinks, but tell me, what was he supposed to do instead?" He snaps around, and even Marquez is absolutely wrecked drunk. Right now, our protagonist is the only one still conscious, so he has to take a drink too. He keeps it light since he's got work tomorrow, while IL and Marquez go all in and fully lose themselves to the night. Still, that bad feeling Marquez warned him about earlier keeps gnawing at his mind. He quickly clocks it. Marquez is desperate to die, but his immortality skills trap him, refusing to let him go. Morning hits, and Kamuro Naoki throws an apology out fast, while Marquez admits he can't grant his request to die, because the real plan was darker. Marquez wanted Kamuro Naoki to steal everyone's skills, drain their immortality, and finally let Marquez cash out with death. He swore he wouldn't do it and apologized, shattering the hope he'd just been holding. After the party wrapped up, Marquez dropped off and passed out fast, and our protagonist finally exhaled. He grinned, then slipped out for a walk to clear his head. Then something felt off, and he snapped into action, using his detection magic to see who was there, only to realize it was ghosts. He gave them a grateful nod for all the prep they'd done for the ghost party, and the spirits swooped down, asking if he needed anything else, but he just smiled and said he summoned them because he'd seen them. Then it hit him: find a place to rest, and ask the ghosts if they'll join him on the tea plantation. After a while, everyone curled up inside the tea plantation, and Kamuro Naoki brewed himself a cup. Then he glanced at the sky, and the ghosts swore they'd heard him say they looked just like real elves. He couldn't help asking why, and the ghosts replied, "Our teacher said he loved elves, and we loved him even more." They promised elves were beautiful and gentle, but that was only the start. Marquez had a whole stack of old tales to spill, and our protagonist leaned in, listening hard to Marquez's life and the lessons he picked up in that very place. They claimed the wisdom they had right now came straight from Marquez Kamuro Naoki. Yet nobody saw it coming when it turned out Tyler learned everything from Marquez's stories and tales. They obsessed over these stories too, then convinced themselves that if they acted more like Marquez, he'd actually light up like, "Now we're having fun." And Kamuro Naoki pitched it to them so they could enjoy themselves here. Marquez taunted them, nailing them with arrows as he cackled out loud, and he thanked them for spilling their stories to him, then leaned in and asked if they'd let him teach them something. And Geist Tyler honestly had no clue what he was supposed to pass on. The very next day, Kamuro Naoki and the others marched right back into the middle of the winter hall. And this time, Kamuro Naoki had a real game plan ready. Then they started digging tiny burrows. Once they finally had enough, Ire snapped, "So what's the point of bringing our hero?" Then he spilled his whole destruction scheme. First, they'd torch the forest pig's fur right on top of the meat to crank out that deadly smell. Then he'd shove the bait into the burrow, and as soon as it was set, they'd vanish and hide. Kamuro Naoki had a hunch this all started back yesterday, the moment the snow fox crossed paths with the snow, and he swore it wasn't going to repeat. This time, he was going to make it right. Snow foxes started popping up as bait, and Kamuro Naoki shut them inside the hole like a trap snapping shut. He urgently shouted at Still to speed up, like they were about to hit a deadline they couldn't afford to miss. Together, they blitzed the snow foxes with razor-sharp knives, slicing through their necks fast and clean, until not a single trapped fox was left, and that day Kamuro Naoki personally wiped out around 30 of them. Then he stormed back to the drinking area, where Marquez and Isle were already toasting their victory. As soon as Kamuro Naoki finished, he bolted up and stormed out of the room, leaving the other two passed out and stuck behind. He raced back to the very same tree plantation, ready to drill Geist Tyler all those familiar techniques, just like yesterday. The very next day, Kamuro Naoki and Isle finally hit their target, wiping out 78 of the 500 foxes, then kept pushing until Marquez's gut started screaming at them, and when the final bell rang, they nailed the mission and wiped out all 500 snow foxes. But they still had to grind out about 20 more days to finish the job safely, and while they waited, Marquez went full mad scientist, downing buoys and balsa, then somehow cranked out 2 studies in that same stretch. The very next morning, it was time for Kamuro Naoki and the others to finally head out, so he thanked Marquez for looking after them this whole time. Marquez just grinned and said he hadn't had this much fun in years. Then he shoved a surprising gift into our protagonist's hands as a thank you, and Kamuro Naoki was stunned. He never saw that huge pile of cash coming, so he fought to refuse it again and again. But at last he clawed his money back for good, while Mark just wore that crushed, sad face. If he ever crossed paths with an elf from the village, he demanded our protagonist, Kamuro Naoki, to find a girl named Linya, and he swore that when elves die, their souls rocket back to their homeland's world tree and are reborn, so Kamuro couldn't shake the question. Was this Linya the same elf tied to Marquez's party? So he swallowed the fear and accepted the request, then promised he'd give it his all, like he meant it. Our protagonist clocked it while he and Marcus were still together, and something just felt off, like a gap opened between them. Then Marcus flashed a smile and sent him packing, the kind you'd give a stranger. But still he pushed on, unable to tell his 300-year-old senior, who demanded he erase himself. And he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a meeting, it was a one-time goodbye. They headed for their boat, and Isle and Versa were grinning like everything was perfect. Yet our protagonist's stomach sank, and when Isle finally asked what was wrong, he clenched his fist, sprinted back to Marquez, and burst toward him out of breath, shouting Marquez's name at the top of his lungs. So what the heck was Kamuro Naoki doing here? Marquez and Naoki sat down, chatting away, and then Marquez pushed for tea together, remembering it was his very first time there. Back then, they both felt painfully awkward from Marquez's weird request. They laughed at what they'd heard, and Marquez poured tea for Naoki, then apologized for dodging him. But Kamuro Naoki couldn't pull Marquez back, because no skill in the world could save him. The curly-haired man grabbed the teapot, tapped it like a lifeline, and muttered that all he wanted was to bolt from this empty life. At that instant, it hit him. Knowledge that never dies matters more than a body that does. That's why Marquez dove into dungeon research, and the weight of it crushed him with sadness. Time started feeling like a personal punishment, and he thought he couldn't take another breath. Then Marquez suddenly rose up, locked eyes with him, and rushed in with a full apology. Naoki's jaw dropped when Marquez came up in the conversation. Tez admits his words haunt him, because they could have turned him into a killer. He dropped to the edge of his pride and apologized with total honesty. After some time, Kamuro Naoki raced back to Isle and Versa, ready to jump right back into their journey. Still, Marquez sat all alone in the corner. Then Geist Tyler sneaked in behind him, and Marquez caught him. Finally, the two of them closed in on Marquez and cornered him until he had to make tea. When Marquez took a sip of the tea Geist Tyler brewed, shock hit him hard, because one of Geist Tyler's people said that every single night. Naoki sat them down and taught them how to brew tea, swearing that if they both level up their skills, the master will finally beam with pride. And then Naoki will pass along the next tea-making secret. Marquez suddenly remembered Naoki's explanation for why Geist Tylers looked like elves. It was because they loved the old stories Marquez always spun, and the first time they saw him smile was when they transformed into elves. Marquez was over the moon, so they weren't going back to their original forms. And just like Geist, Tyler had empathy too, same as him, same as Naoki. If he could talk to them, Why wouldn't he just go and make real friends? So Marquez finally wouldn't have to face it alone anymore. Clutching Naoki's words in his mind, Marquez burst into tears, soft sobs, not sorrow, because joy was burning so bright in his chest that it had to spill out. Geist Taylor, seeing their master break down in tears, figured the tea they brewed had to be downright awful. Marquez motioned them both to sit beside him, then said, "If you want to make me smile, you better learn how to brew tea. Practice it together." From this moment on, Marquez was taking the lead and teaching them everything. That man was Kamuro Naoki. No mission, no chains, just a reincarnated soul from another world. And Marquez burst into happiness, thinking he was a genuinely good guy, the most fascinating person around, and feeling truly grateful to him. Naoki couldn't stop thinking about it. How even monsters could still forge real, deep bonds with others. Even with the calm sea breeze blowing in, unease crawled over him as his instincts screamed that danger was closing in fast. Suddenly, a towering dragon surged up and seized their boat, hauling it with effortless might, while bragging that it had centuries of strength no one could match. The dragoness chased the red dragon's scent like a lifeline, her motives a mystery. But her heart was doing all the driving. Something monstrous and totally unknown surged behind them, and the next second, everything went to chaos as their ships tore apart into splinters. Surprised by the massive ocean dragon, Ale jerked her weapon up in pure alarm, like her body knew danger before her mind did. Suspicion sharpened her voice as she grilled them about how they were connected to the red dragon's scent. Mauki remembered the red dragon's manstone. Its lingering scent had somehow pulled the devoted water dragon straight in. While the dragon was gone, wyvern raids kept smashing nearby settlements, and everyone started panicking about why he wouldn't lift a finger. Even though it didn't want to leave, the dragon snapped back into thinking, and Naoki's pitch lit the spark to see what lay outside. Naoki didn't swing at all. He tossed out advice, then got hit with a man of stone so he could stay in contact. He snatched the communication pouch and grumbled in clear disapproval, while the dragon practically basked in the fact that it finally had a human ally. Naoki mastered the bag-granted magical communication, and suddenly dragons could feel it, recognizing and trusting whoever held it. Just before he left, he swore they'd meet again someday, reaching out a hand that said everything without a single word. Hanging on through the rolling waves, the crew charged toward town, stunned as the dragon tore through the ocean with unmatched speed. Malky let out an awkward laugh while the dragon fretted, about love, about eggs, and about how totally new she was to everything. Suddenly she snapped with paranoia, accused her lover of cheating, and swore she'd catch him red-handed right there in town. Naoki knew it wasn't betrayal at all. Centuries of solitude had fogged her heart with loneliness. Her sincerity hit him hard, and he couldn't help but marvel that even dragons in this world could still fall deeply in love. I'll clocked that deep, worried look on his face and leaned in, eyeing him like, "Wait, are you sick or running a fever?" Naoki froze the moment Isle's blazing stare pinned him, and he had zero clue how to answer. Out of nowhere, her sudden closeness and changed posture slammed into him, and everyone nearby stared on, their faces locked in pure confusion. In the water, he poured out his exhaustion, because he'd been up all night guarding that fragile ship. Blushing hard and stumbling over his words, Naoki couldn't admit what he was really going through. He just mumbled that he was still a man. In the quiet of his thoughts, he let out a heavy sigh, because in this new world, lust wasn't just temptation, it was his biggest enemy. Worried about Naoki's condition, Ale and Versa stepped in to help as Naoki wrestled with whether to follow his impulse. Frustration burned hotter and hotter as dragons got love lives, while he stayed doomed, trapped in a room full of women and still somehow unlucky. He snapped into silent panic, clutched his head, and spiraled into self-pity as the others just stared at him in confusion. Naoki refused to let fate write his story, so he planned to hit the infamous girl's only shop himself. With a stone-cold face, he calmly offered to soothe the water dragon the moment betrayal was confirmed. Fists clenched, Naoki urged the dragon on, its heart softened, and the beast was moved by his bold kindness. At his order, the whole crew surged ahead, water whipping behind them as their mission finally kicked into high gear. They stepped onto the shore and froze. This peaceful town looked unreal, and the crisp, quiet air welcomed them like a promise. Right when they thought it was over, the water dragon snapped into a brand new form, turning into a human girl with ancient dragon magic. Naoki's thoughts tangled up as she stood there completely nude, and somehow, shockingly, shame didn't even exist in this world. Naoki gripped her hand with unshakable confidence, and the dragon girl swore they'd go straight for the red dragon. Versa overheard them, then bolted after them, screaming that she couldn't wait to jump into the mission that just erupted. Outside the manor, Naoki demanded answers at the top of his lungs, and his voice ricocheted off the black dragon's towering walls. The red dragon's tired voice crackled out, barely awake, and it squinted at Naoki like it could barely remember who he was. Inside, Naoki caught him lounging with women who shot up in shock, and they panicked as he calmly broke down the whole situation like it was nothing. Naoki watched those red dragons flanked by women and snapped with bitter rage, cursing the man like he was a stone, responsible for every single thing. Rage blazing in its scales, the furious water dragon burst in without a second thought, then tore into her lover, blaming him for blatant, shameless cheating. She yanked the red dragon by the ear and snapped at him in front of Naoki, who just stood there, cheeks burning with second-hand embarrassment. When Isle asked, Naoki waved off the chaos like it was nothing, just a small romantic mix-up, and he swore it was finally settled. Versa decided to stay put, hungry to study humanoid dragons, while Naoki raced back to repair the ship. As Naoki tore down the stairs, an imposing black dragon stepped right up and greeted him, shocked to find a human at the door. Later, calm confidence in his eyes, he finally confessed to cheating, then claimed one woman just wasn't enough to quench his dragon urges. From across the way, Isle and Versa stared in awe as his commanding aura made him look like a born leader. Just before they split, Black Dragon leaned in and demanded Naoki seriously think about a favor tied to his exterminator skills. Naoki froze on the spot, stunned as his mind screamed, "Why would a dragon ever need help from someone like me?" Naoki answered carefully, totally baffled. What could dragons possibly want from him, other than pest control advice? He made it crystal clear. If all they wanted was to test his strength, he wasn't buying it. Black Dragon didn't answer at all. He unleashed his powers to test Naoki himself, right then, and steer the situation his way. Torn out of his shock, Naoki finally learned the truth. His level was 91, and that hit so hard it left him stunned, yet absolutely itching to know more. With mutual respect, they sealed the moment with vows, each one owning up to the earlier chaos, and admitting they really were kind of strange in their own way. Naoki rejects the offer of wealth and dragon protection, then makes it clear. His eyes are locked only on the maps those dragons might be hiding. Naoki gets dragged to the place and immediately grills the situation, asking why on earth dragons would bother owning ships and maps. He leans in like it's nothing and drops the real truth. His brothels are where those rumors are born. Still thrown off but totally hooked, Naoki decides to keep going and listen, because they've already come this far. Later, Naoki jumps in to help two girls in the river, declaring it his exterminator's noble duty. The exterminator got a terrifying assignment: wipe out a town overrun by zombies and survive a dragon lurking in the shadows. The team didn't even think twice. They locked in on the mission and tore straight for the infested outskirts. Locals swore the dragon was sealed inside a cave, and its poisonous fog was trapped right along with it. And that's when Oki realized the dragon was alive. It had rotted into a deadly, undead zombie dragon. With the black dragons in the middle of the action, Noki shot a sharp question at them. Why would a powerhouse need someone else's help? Black Dragon ripped the mask off the past. She wasn't just an enemy. She used to be their comrade, and now she'd been twisted into something undead and tragic. She's the Light Dragon, his once noble mentor, radiant as a beacon, and so respected everyone bowed when she entered. The hero tore away from her as her wounds rotted open, and that spreading decay hijacked her, turning her into a zombie. Her poisonous corruption wrecked the land, spreading infection until city streets went silent, and the undead took over. Looking back on everything, Naoki braced himself and accepted the farewell waiting for even heroes in this strange world. While Noki was setting up zombie traps, he put brothels at the top of the list, because in his mind they were the town's morale boost. With giant chunks of boar meat, he set a devious trap, baiting zombies into one spot so he could wipe them out in a single, brutal extermination. Isles suddenly burst in, demanded to come along, and refused to care about the terrifying danger of taking on a dragon. With pure confidence blazing in her chest, Isle declared she'd taken the dragon down all by herself. No hesitation, no backup. Naoki hesitated, because he could feel how crushing Light Dragon's power was, and he knew even the toughest warriors couldn't just shrug it off. Naoki warned that his poisonous myths could slip into fresh open wounds, and turn him into a zombie right in the middle of the fight. Isle stormed off in total silence, her pride bleeding out, leaving Noki staring after her, terrified he'd pushed things too far. Ahead of him, Isle stood strong and faithful, and her reminder hit him hard. She was keeping the promise she'd once sworn. Naoki barked out the instructions. Isle, stick to my lead, while Versa got busy breaking down zombie tissue for the prep. With the gear handed out and the plan locked in, they finished every last prep and then waited, tense and ready, for the next day to arrive. By the break of dawn, the whole team crashed into the sealed cave where the dragon was entombed. Noki scanned the ground, and the moment he clocked the lay of the land, he knew that Dragon Zombie was probably buried deep inside the central cavern. When Naoki tried to crack open the cave, deadly mist could have poured out, but he slammed the brakes, pointing to the extermination rules and insisting the environment needed protecting. He ditched brute force and unleashed a smart plan that crushed the job fast, clean, efficient, and done. To kick off his master plan, Noki handed Isle and Black Dragon magically enhanced gas masks that hit like a game changer. Noki hands out the rolls, and Isle lands the fatal strike on the dragon's neck as he purifies the whole area. With a heavy sigh, the Black Dragon handed Noki the mission, convinced the Light Dragon just wanted peace. A magic circle flared to life as they got ready to tear into the ground, while the dragon zombie stayed hidden right underneath. Elsewhere, zombies surged and multiplied fast, and Noki clenched his spray can, wondering if he'd even brought enough to survive. A deep purple mist blurred everything. Then a huge shadow crawled out of the haze like it was stalking them. That monstrous dragon zombie lurched, and Isle and Noki didn't hesitate. Noki lunged first and grabbed the opening to smash back. A crushing strike hit the dragon's ripped, armored neck, and blood and rot erupted everywhere. The beast jerked upward in agony, and in that chaos Noki and Isle came into view below. Noki clocked the danger and bolted backward, slipping past flying debris as the dragon unleashed a furious roar. Finally, the dragon fully revealed itself, an absolute nightmare, rotten to the core, swelling into a monstrous shape, dripping with foul, decaying fluids and gruesome rays. Isle's strike landed. The Light Dragon's thick neck fought it tooth and nail, and a poison mist burst out, crawling around them fast. With a powerful leap, Isle unleashed her windstep magic and rocketed herself straight above the dragon. Blood sprayed hard as Noki finally saw it. Isle's non-stop attacks were finally cracking the dragon. When the fight finally died down, the cleansing tools swung into action. Then Melky dug through Light Dragon's remains and uncovered a magic stone. Black Dragon cradled the stone with trembling care, while Noki and Isle slipped away side by side. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the air, like the dragon's final cry. Then Noki froze into silence. When the clouds finally broke, Noki froze in place and watched a single dragon-shaped shadow soar away into the far distance. Isle cornered Noki and demanded to know, did she really pass as a comrade, or was she only a fighter? She remembered how Noki once handed her solid gear by mistake. Back then it felt like pity, but now it hit her as pure trust. Isle backed off, terrified that in the next battles she'd turn into a weight they couldn't afford to carry. Noki finally confessed the truth. He wasn't afraid of her holding him back. He was terrified she'd be taken away. He looked back on his calm, peaceful days, back when even a tiny scrape would spike his nerves and make him tread with non-stop care. Living in this world felt like stepping through a minefield. Danger lurked around every corner, and even goblins could tear you down. Yet that fear still clung to the deepest part of his heart. Milky admitted the caution wasn't meant to help them at all. It was his selfish fear, hiding behind fake protective care. Noki stood frozen while Isle stormed off, clenching her fist as frustration swallowed her whole. I finally faced him. My eyes softened, as I realized she'd mistaken my silence for rejection or doubt. She insisted her frustration wasn't rage at all, and Noki had screwed up by assuming she didn't care about their partnership anymore. With a shaky breath, Isle steadied her heart and swore to fight by her own choice, owning every consequence, refusing to need anyone's protection. With the pressure finally lifting, they nodded and promised to head back together, knowing the world had already shifted. As they headed home, Noki's worries melted away, and laughter took over, sealed by Isle's comforting smile. Nelki sprinted back to base, only to freeze in terror as zombies boiled alive in the water, the whole scene hitting like a truck. Versa stayed cool, cast the bait, and when the medicine suddenly ran out, she still managed to drown the zombies. Once the town was finally secured, Nelki packed up to leave, grateful, still stunned by the bizarre crew that helped him. They launched on a dragon-guided ship, raking in treasure like it was nothing, and streaked off to chase the next mystery adventure. As they pushed onward, the three of them burst into rare laughter, and the waves glittered all around like they were cheering too. Noke hesitated for a split second, then demanded a private talk, his face tightening fast beneath that bright, sunny sky. With surprising honesty, he flat-out admitted he wanted to hit a brothel, hungry for something new, something private, something he'd never had before. Versa froze in shock, while Ale shut his mouth and stared. Everything went silent, and his silence shattered the light mood in an instant. Even with that awkward tension hanging in the air, Versa kept her head and answered straight, while Ale stared ahead, realizing just how far they'd actually come. Ale smirked with full confidence, and to everyone's surprise, he jumped in to serve him, matching his spirit down to the bone. Noki got caught off guard. Both girls closed in so fast that panic exploded in his chest, and he couldn't stop flustering. He cannonballed into the ocean, suddenly realizing this whole voyage turned into an awkward seaside setup. 2 chaotic days later, the storm finally broke. Silence crashed back over the sea, rocking the ship with eerie waves and wiping everything into nothing but memories. They finally reached Port Town Flora, bowed to the dragon, and stepped into the next chapter like the adventure was about to explode. Town life burst at the seams. Every street corner felt like a brand new doorway to something wild and possible. Melky burst inside with blazing excitement, completely clueless that this same old stop was about to collide with the most life-changing meeting of all. In broad daylight, a shadowy killer lifted his blade and struck without a sound, driving it straight through his target. Blood splattered the pavement, and a chilling omen hung in the air. Then chaos crashed in, and Nookie walked straight into it. Noki stumbled into Flowerport with zero clue, right as the ships were docking, while locals fought and snapped at each other, and troublemakers among the adventurers started causing chaos near the taverns. Noki tore away from his companions and slipped off by himself, not realizing unseen enemies were already stalking every step he took. While Ailes hunted for a place to stay and Versa tore through repairs, Nokia followed the clues straight toward a trap. With nothing but nerves and confidence driving him, Noki strode down the alley, and at last, he reached the brothel he'd been promised. The curtain fluttered, and Nyaki peeked in with shining hope, basically begging, "Are you still open?" Horror slammed into him. There was a girl sprawled in blood, and all around, others shook with fear as one man rained down brutal blows without mercy. Blood stained the girl, giving first aid, as the other girl screamed like her life depended on it. Noki clutched his bag as the screams bounced around him, totally powerless while chaos swallowed the brothel. Noki dangled a rare potion in front of the brothel girl, and her panic skyrocketed, because she couldn't possibly pay for medicine like that. With a calm breath, he leaned in and admitted it. His own hands brewed that potion, homemade and brutally potent. The moment the liquid kissed his skin, his wounds snapped shut, scabs peeling away like magic, and that miracle instantly sparked awe and a sick twist of concern. Noki moved like she'd done it 100 times, tending the deeper cuts with steady hands. Then a wave of relief hit. She made an excuse, slipped away quietly, and left him to breathe again. Right before he disappeared, she sprinted after him, demanding she repay him, and then begged for a private place to talk. She chuckled under her breath, taunted Nokia into remembering why he'd come to seek companionship in the first place, not for any heroic fantasy. She flashed a teasing smile and nudged him toward a quiet hill, quietly handing him the chance at a private moment. Suddenly, she thrust her underwear into his hands, and Noki, stunned, grabbed it with a grateful breath. Maria flashed a wink and said, "I'm Maria," and Noke swallowed his nerves, embarrassed but still perfectly composed. Clutching her gift awkwardly, she stared at the whole ridiculous mess. And the second his brothel visit started, it turned into something completely different. On the ruined church hill, Noki sat alone, staring into the wreckage as the whole place went hauntingly silent. With a wicked grin, he inspected Maria's weird gift. Then his smile faltered as confusion hit him, wondering how it was even supposed to work. While Noki crouched to test his idea, a voice suddenly snapped his attention. Then a mysterious girl appeared like she'd slipped in from nowhere. Shaken to the core, he demanded answers. Then the girl swore they'd never met, her face stone calm and unreadable. She answered Noki's silent thoughts with a grin full of mystery, her words sounding like riddles that still somehow told the whole truth. Noki's mind snapped back to those same words from before, and reality lurched, glowing around him in a creepy, unnatural light. With a calm smile, the mysterious figure finally dropped the mask. Turns out they were God. God laid out their purpose, and Noki, totally unmoved, just listened, because the world's logic had already fallen apart long ago. Suddenly, the ground detonated with a brutal crash, and a hostile presence charged toward them at full speed. An intruder burst in, laughing like he owned the place, and he blared that he was an evil god, chasing the outsider's attention and whipping chaos into the room. Evil God stopped cold, clocking something odd. "Kamuro, no key in your hand." He hesitated, confused. Noki lifted it inch by inch and exposed the undergarment. Then both men froze in stunned silence, and even God blinked, caught off guard. Once it was all explained, everything finally clicked. Three of them huddled together, stitching the chaos into something they could actually understand. God made it crystal clear. This wasn't just a request, it was divine. Noki, half joking, took it on like any other job. God's hands thrust together, and a dazzling light ignited between them, shouting that Noki's divine mission was starting right now. A glowing map burst above them, and Noki froze in pure awe, because this world looked straight up shattered. As they watched, the crew huddled up and debated erosion, expanding dry zones, and how the land was going downhill fast across the whole region. Noki clocked the sign and realized the damage tearing the world apart wasn't an accident. It was the price of reckless heroics and a divine fight that kept escalating. Those glowing spots were mana pools, and once they were gone, the southern lands went dead, magic refusing to work at all. God declared mana keeps life alive. Then once balance snapped, ecosystems crumbled, and the whole world teetered on the edge of total destruction. The gods started a full-blown blame war, and Noki got handed a mission. Unstable mana pools were scattered all over the place. Noki stayed calm and proposed a wild but smart plan, using plants to gulp up mana, because it could actually help them in a big way. He pitched the idea that idea pollens and slimes could spread magic on their own, and even God looked genuinely, unexpectedly impressed. With a scream that shook the air, the evil god rocketed up into the sky, bursting with excitement for the wild experiment about to begin. As the calm finally came back, Noke leaned in and started grilling everyone. What really makes a hero in this world? God declares it plain. Heroes don't get appointed, they get forged, blessed by spiritual power from forces you can't even see. When they accept those blessings, regular adventurers skyrocket in power, until their spirits and their humanity lock together, moving as one. Yet even God admits it. Spirits move on their own, and they don't listen to commands. So that's exactly why Noki's mission finally explodes into view. He has to hunt down rogue heroes who broke divine balance and cut them down. God steps in and orders the purge of the extra heroes, throwing the world's balance into total chaos. Naoki stumbled back, shaking, because that request sounded like a final verdict, like fate itself had already locked the decision in. Shaking with horror, he can't stop asking, could the divine really demand heroes be killed and call that bloodshed right? A vision slams into place. Naoki standing on a mountain of fallen warriors, crushed under a weight so heavy it feels like it might break him. God seals the rule. Use the method to destroy or erase spirits and crush their heroic status. No one gets to say no. Even with everything hanging on the outcome, Noki steps forward and takes the mission, steel resolve burning in his eyes. Naoki rolled into a brand new city, his mind racing over a creepy request: wipe out rogue heroes. Confused by gods, spirits, and heroes, he finally mapped out a ruthless plan built on practical extermination. At the city guild, he slapped down the paperwork to officially register his cleaning and pest control business, then got ready to start working. Naoki said, with rock-solid confidence and a spark of ambition, that he was launching his own company. Later, back at the inn, his companions pressed him hard, wondering if the workload had shoved him into starting his own thing. While he sat with his team, Naoki laid it out: how these travel jobs were just a cover for the real mission, rather. Instead of blindly chasing heroes, he pictured a huge network of employees stretching across far-off regions, thanking. Because people were kind to him before, he got hit with unexpected backup, and even medicine, from unlikely allies who were honestly grateful. Now the new president, Naoki, gets divine orders. He scrambles to gather proof, then moves to silence heroes and spirits, using his power, and he's left utterly baffled. Overwhelmed and desperate, he dug through old records, hunting for a clue that could finally wipe out the strongest one. Nasuki quietly watched his companions, and suddenly they exploded with unexpected excitement and bright, cheerful energy. Lost in thought, he wondered who on earth would back the heroes and still keep the battlefield clean of unnecessary bloodshed. Dale stomped onto the stage and claimed the title of vice president, while Versa grinned and took over as the company's researcher. Stunned by how hard they were to leave, Naoki realized both plans were dead on arrival. Each one came with a personal reason that locked them in. With loyalty like that, he nodded to both women and made it crystal clear: they were the essential muscle for the battles about to explode. Versa took over the pricing decisions and pitched a gold-backed salary plan, stacking productivity bonuses on top while clearly splitting out the expenses. 2 days later, Naoki finally got the green light. He received approval and a merchant certificate, so he could officially kick off his business. With the paperwork finally done, the Camaro company was officially born, and Nyoke stood tall as its new president, proud and unstoppable. A strange, proud fire lit up inside him. Then he nodded, agreed to start right away, and kicked it all off with a lunch meeting. His buddies were already pitching lunch like it was a business must-buy. Then panic hit him, because now he had to wonder if the whole company would even make it through. As he dug into the meal, Naoki refused to rehash everything. He kept the mission's full truth tightly under wraps. When he started talking about the company's future, he pushed hard for a rapid search for stronger, more trustworthy allies. People pushed for a ship captain and a squad of fighters, because every mission needed those critical roles to stay one step ahead. Naoki mapped out his staffing plan, lining up skilled workers like tailors and trainers to back every single employee. Before he left the inn, he ordered Isle and Versa to scout for work, and made sure word got out while they were gone. He rushed to the guild, slapped in recruitment requests, and kicked off Camaro Company's hiring campaign for real. The company threw job offers out in the open, hunting for people who had experience with ships and could sew for the role. Later, the whole crew rolled up to a massive mansion, because that's where the next job was waiting for them. The homeowner greeted him, and Naoki pitched their services on the spot, while Versa stood there, blown away by the mansion's massive, grand scale. As he stepped into the basement, he scanned the filthy room and readied his tools for a full-on extermination. After unleashing his extermination agents, Naoki sprinted through the basement and tore everything apart, until the floor was littered with piles of dead vermin. With the mask on, he held up the bag of remains for the mansion owner, then watched the man grin in satisfaction. That evening, Naoki and Isle stormed back into the inn, and Versa greeted them like family. Right before Naoki could even catch his breath, Versa stormed in with a crisis. Something was wrong with their company name, and it was urgent. News hit them hard. A thief had slipped aboard their cargo ship, and it looked like they were hunting the brand new delivery. Naoki turned down their offer, then slipped away solo, heading into the shipyard to investigate it on his own. He hit the docks and immediately clocked a sketchy warehouse, then rushed in to verify the report was real. Inside the building, workers froze in panic when the intruder slipped out. Then Naoki arrived, introduced himself, and got waved through. He got word that the intruder wasn't just any troublemaker. It was a dangerous catfolk, and the staff didn't mince words, calling it erratic and downright aggressive. Naoki caught sight of a ragged kid bolting away, and it shocked the whole crew, because they hadn't seen him at all. The intruder tore in with a reckless attack, but Naki snapped back with a razor-precise counter and shut him down in seconds. Even with a desperate lunge, the catfolk boy got slammed down and knocked unconscious, again, just before he could break free. Later, Naoki finally learned the runaway's name, Seth, fleeing from Lake Adele's village. Seth confessed he wanted to be a fisherman, not a thief. He just craved honest work. Even so, no real damage happened. The break-in was still chillingly serious, because Seth feared he'd be enslaved if he got formally punished, and grilled him on his cooking skills and ship-handling experience, demanding proof of his qualifications. Naoki was blown away by Seth's answer, so he snatched up the moment and offered him the captain's slot under company training. Seth's jaw dropped. Still drowning in guilt and pure disbelief, Seth blurted out questions the moment the offer was spoken. Then he paused. Seth grabbed the handshake, and that single moment declared it. His official start with Komuro Company. Grinning under the weight of trust, Seth bowed deeply, swore his loyalty, and stepped inside as Nagoki welcomed him aboard. As night melted into morning, the city buzzed awake, totally oblivious to what was about to hit, new developments unfolding in silence. At a roaring tavern packed with noise and clinking mugs, a horned girl spotted the guild's job board right by the entrance. Seeing the Komuro Company post, the girl's smile lit up as she got ready to fire off her application. Naoki Komuro swings into the moment and suddenly learns someone's been waiting to join his company. Straight up catches him completely off guard. He spots a horned beast girl, pure nerves in motion, standing in the open like she doesn't know where to put herself, blushing hard as she realizes she's being watched. Even while sweat poured through her thick clothes, Maramu burst in, smiling like crazy, and practically begged to be hired. Blown away by her unstoppable energy, Naoki finally gives in and hires her, then demands she dress better before they hit the streets together. He officially opens the door and welcomes Maramu as his brand new assistant and travel partner. Naoki hustles Maramu to a shop and tosses her some lighter clothes so she can finally handle the heat. Inside the shop, Maramu starts transforming, ripping off that bulky outfit soaked in miserable, uncomfortable sweat. She steps into the glow and light clothes, feeling totally exposed, but somehow grateful anyway, while Naoki scrambles in panic, totally awkwardly reacting to what he's just seen. Trying to keep her cool, Naoki pulls her along and introduces her to friends who are desperately in need of supplies. They barrel past the market's loud stalls and sizzling food stands, pushing right on with their mission through the buzzing streets. At the height of a lively meal, Naoki stands up and formally introduces Maramu to every member of his party. Ale, a battle-hardened warrior, steps forward and introduces herself with fearless swagger, bragging about her major titles and making it clear she's a combat force people fear. Naoki snaps into surprise the second she realizes her title changed, after she jumped in to help the light dragon during that crisis. Verso, a steady magician, opens up about his past and throws himself into monster research under Naoki's watchful guidance. The whole group freezes when they realize both newcomers carry rare titles shared by just 10 people across the entire nation. While everyone else laughs at the titles, Seth can't shake the feeling that Naoki's quiet presence is eclipsing him. Calm, commanding, and way too powerful to ignore. Naoki shrugs and casually drops his level 91. Seth and Murumu instantly faceplant into a dead faint. Murumu can barely process it, stuck in pure disbelief. Then, driven by curiosity, she learns the job is all about exterminating bugs, wading through blood and surviving filthy, unsanitary conditions. Even with that terrifying answer hanging in the air, Murumu stays planted in his seat, while Seth is so shaken he nearly keels over into his untouched meal. Marumu's not intimidated at all. This challenge electrifies her, and the idea of jumping into deadly extermination missions makes her pulse race with excitement. Marumu jolts back to that close call with the poisoned spider, somehow acting almost too calm about death itself. Her bloody upbringing carved gore into her comfort zone, and now he's left wondering what's going on in her head. Once the plates get cleared, the whole group snaps back into focus, ready to dig into a serious talk over food and drinks. Now Seth finally decides it's time to explain their work, and you can see the nerves hit him. He doesn't even know what's coming. Naoki strides in with total confidence and announces he's taking charge of Kamuro's company. Right then and there, his crew erupts with cheers and finally puts their trust in him. Naoki finally spills his past. He died in another world and got reborn when a god asked for it. His teammates lurch into shock, trying to wrap their heads around the divine hand that brought their company to life. Naoki calmly lays out the god's mission: erase the corrupted heroes who are wrecking the balance of this world. The whole team freezes in shock when Naoki, smiling wide, cheerfully suggests they team up to exterminate the rogue heroes. When they're finally overwhelmed, the group snaps into focus on how huge the mission is across the hemispheres, and they cling to Naoki's lead. Verso finally grasps what Naoki's mission really means, and her face snaps from confused to downright alarmed. Naoki nods along, realizing, quietly but fully, that this extermination mission might be the one thing that actually saves the whole world. He lifts his mug high with total confidence and declares that their teamwork is what will keep the world from falling apart. The team swallows hard and accepts their mission to wipe out corrupted heroes, only to realize the job is way bigger than anything they ever expected or even dared to imagine. When a fresh day dawns, the city wakes up and buzzes, totally clueless that this crew is about to carry out a secret divine mission. Naoki unfurls the map, and the whole group snaps into curiosity, because nobody expects it to come from where it came from. The Black Dragon's map lays out the big regions for them, steering their route into every extermination mission. Naoki squints at the map and realizes it's basically useless, so he knows the team will have to hit the streets and explore for the real intel. The team, it splits into crews. Some fan out to gather intel, while the rest lock in, train up, and recruit new fighters. Tasks get slammed into place at lightning speed. Marumu grits his teeth, and even though he doesn't want to, he agrees to take on the duties while everyone else scrambles to get ready for battle. Nadoki darts to the guild and checks for updates, but the board's dead. No new hero info at all. He scans everyone's spots on the map, while hashing out the plan with Versa in the hall. Meanwhile, Seth's training starts brutal. He gets bulldozed off his feet by a rampaging wild boar. Ale strides in and drills Seth with serious instructions, starting right from the absolute basics of sword handling. Elsewhere, Murumu beams as she sews the group's uniforms, chasing every tiny detail and polishing the final touches until they're spotless. Naoki and Versa stride past the town walls, then push deep into the wilderness, map in hand as they chase whatever's out there. Versa demands to know the skills he wants, then decides employees should pick for themselves based on what they truly know and what they personally prefer. Right then, chaos erupts nearby, Everyone whips their heads toward a flipped carriage and a beast that's bolting for its life. Naoki stays cool while an owl wildfee horse rockets down the road, blowing everyone's mind. Just before he steps in, with one pinpoint strike, he drops the rampaging horse cold and cuts off the chaos before it can do any damage. Naoki. He rushes to check on the injured travelers, then hands Versa the task of helping them while he presses on to dig deeper. A merchant grabs Versa's attention and demands answers. Who tore the rampage off that horse, and what sparked the whole disaster in the first place? He tore into the wrecked wagon, and there, crouched in grimy fear, sat several trembling girls praying to stay silent. The girls flinch in terror, firing off. Is he the slave or Naoki? But Naoki stays ice calm and shuts it down. He's not. Spying their slave collars, Naoki rushes in with healing medicine and steady reassurance, proof of just how badly he won't let them be broken. Proving he meant her no harm, he watched as she took the medicine in silence, feeble in the body, but relieved to have his kind help. Help came, but her relief didn't last. Her symptoms still kept burning, and he started to feel it. This wasn't just physical wounds anymore. With a cool, unshaken face, she confessed the horrible truth. Her body had been cursed to turn her into a ghoul. After the truth hit him, he slipped out of the wagon without a word, and worry swarmed through his mind. As he tried to justify everything to the others, he couldn't shake the question burning in his mind. What kind of curse was hers, really? He stood there, cool as ice, studying the fee horse, and then he spotted the strange reason behind its violent rampage. Then she pulled out a jar and showed the tiny insect she'd found buried deep inside the horse's ear. He finally nailed it. This wasn't a local bug at all, but a desert locust hopper that somehow slipped into this forested region. After the dust settled, they slammed the incident behind them and escorted the wagon, plus the captives, safely back into town. While she was explaining the creature, he fired up to file the report and get the escort fee settled. Naoki and the warrior went head to head, dissecting how that desert insect flipped the once placid fee horse into a wild, unpredictable beast. Their crew finally regrouped, trading what they'd uncovered, because every team had fanned out into different regions, chasing weird activity and hunting for any real threat. Uniform production was almost done, and others kept chiming in about small monster sightings, but nothing felt like it was going to explode. Yet, Naoki spilled the hero rumor he'd heard, straight from a slave trader who told him how they'd dragged the captive into town. He stared into the danger ahead, sure this weird desert locust wasn't done. Whatever it started, more hidden threats were waiting right behind it, and he couldn't shake the feeling. He slid the insect to the team and tied it straight to the rampaging fihorse disaster. After everything checked out, they slammed the meeting shut and got ready to crash, because tomorrow's early investigation was coming fast. Trapped inside the jar and sealed tight, the locust hopper froze in place under that dim light, watching everything in eerie silence. Naoki slid in ahead of everyone, face stone calm, as towering city walls rose up like a brutal warning beyond him. He blurted out that he was heading straight to the Adventurers Guild, ready to put the locust hopper threat on everyone's radar. Replaying his memories from his past life, Naoki told them how those savage swarms once tore through the farmland, then crushed everything into a brutal famine. Curious companions leaned in and listened hard, suddenly realizing this knowledge could open doors no one else had prepared for. After mulling it over, he pushed his plan: start a pest exterminating company, rake in the profit, and keep the whole community safe. Mariam sprinted to Nasoki, clutching the uniform like it might vanish, and started spilling every weird detail of what just happened to her, right there in the middle of it. She said the uniform sucked her mana dry in an instant, but everyone else insisted it did nothing strange to them. Naoki calmly broke it down. This uniform wasn't just for show. It demanded the right mana capacity, level, or status before it would ever activate. He laid out the tasks with laser focus, urging the crew to train hard, go hunt monsters, and level up their gear. After they finished prepping, he broke off from the group, and Versa chose to stick with him to dig into the research. The crew burst into Flora's government office, desperate to dig up answers about the locust hopper infestation. Naoki strides up to the receptionist, lays out why they're there, and his partner watches the receptionist's weird reaction like a hawk. They followed the instructions and slipped into the dark basement, and every careful step clanged through the hallway like a warning. In the suffocating dark, Naoki replayed the receptionist's advice and made up his mind. He had to find that informed person and ask. He thumped the heavy door with a hard knock, announcing their arrival and making it crystal clear they had to talk. Right now. Naoki walked into the office, slammed his name down, and explained they were there to investigate the deadly locust hopper. Inside, they ran into Riddle Blacks, an influential landlord with a scholar's curiosity and too much power for his own good. Naoki finally figured out the truth. He was the king's cousin, and they stuffed him in a room overflowing with endless books and meticulous records. He finally admitted he'd been digging into past outbreaks, laying out dusty old documents about the locust hopper like it was a chilling case file. Side by side, they mapped the rain's patterns to the swarms from long ago, and as they compared it all, the same kind of reports from the past few days came rushing back. Naoki leaned in as his buddy blurted out nervous observations, and the two of them just couldn't stop worrying about the weird things that had been happening lately. They rushed to Riddle with a terrifying report, a runaway who swore he survived a sudden, deadly flash flood, and Riddle listened as he explained that the look on his face turned stone cold, and he made it clear this was too dangerous to shrug off without an immediate investigation. Records talked about a locust hopper they stumbled on by pure luck, and somehow it got tied to wild, unpredictable natural disturbances. That heavy rain just kept pouring, and both of them felt it. The next devastating swarm could be on its way. Riddle snapped straight to Naoki, demanding to know if he'd ever heard about the destruction tied to locusts. He pulled the memory from his past world and confirmed it was real, calling it Kagai, a nightmare swarm that tears everything apart. The records laid out phase mutation in chilling detail, how grasshoppers exploded in numbers and wrecked farmland across the globe. Ancient scrolls paint the swarms as pure disaster, like a black storm tearing through the sky, warning that calamity is about to strike. Naoki watched Riddle in silence, hanging on his every word while the elder's mind raced through the dangerous implications. Then they hashed out the threat, and the truth hit them hard. Another disastrous swarm could crash back into the world any day now. Riddle admitted he wasn't sure, and he pushed them to hunt down the root cause of those possible locust mutations first. Nashoki pushed for pesticide development like their lives depended on it. And when everyone else confessed they had no clue what to do, the room felt the clock ticking. Those flowers from his old world, back when they mattered, were used as natural insecticides. Naoki decided to press deeper, and he marched the whole crew straight toward the slave trader's trail. Smiling with unstoppable confidence, he promised his companions they'd step in and take over whenever the hard moments hit. After Riddle got their gratitude, the crew geared up to leave, with their sights set on the town's entrance as their next stop. At the ruined church, Naoki rushed to report what he found, calling it essential work while everyone else hunted for heroes. He insisted they do everything the right way, and his companion couldn't stop thinking how that kind of care was winning people over. Even without a deadline, the request still felt like a ticking bomb, because the northern hemisphere was days away from being wiped out. Naoki quickly regrouped with her, checked that her errand was finished, and then they took off together. He leaned over the map and jabbed at yesterday's encounter spot, then pushed for more desert searching. He examined his shoes and cast a magical spell that slammed supportive pressure from the air around his feet. With the tweaks done, he urged her to trust her new speed and go for it. Steeling himself, he dropped into a crouch, ready to sprint beside her and grind out stamina through practice. Naoki pushed them to head straight for the slave trader's hideout, betting it would be brutal, hands-on training. When he gave the signal, both of them launched into a sprint, chasing victory and testing their limits with pure, raw speed. They barreled forward across the ground, tearing through the rubble and scattering debris with relentless, unstoppable force. From a distance, the town watched blur after blur streak through the streets, proof that they could run so fast it looked unreal. Thrilled by how fast they were moving, Versa couldn't stop marveling at their progress, while Naoki double-checked and confirmed they were getting better. Naoki sprinted ahead like a blur, leaving everyone in the dust, then smirked and insisted that was still nowhere near his full power. His companion suddenly spotted a faraway desert beyond the fields, and just like that, they realized their next destination was rushing toward them. They swept the area with their scans, but not a single hostile locust showed up. So they went tearing into the nearby forest to find what was really going on. They didn't slow for a second, barreling through thick, wild vegetation, desperate to hit the locust zone first. Soon after, not long after, they stumbled on survivors who spilled the truth. How a locust surprise attack sparked the Feehorse's savage stampede. While Naoki stacked the supplies, his partner couldn't wait. He readied the net and fired off a clear "let's hunt this bug" signal. She shot the pole out with confidence, announced that the search was officially underway, and caught Naoki off guard with a sudden rush of excitement. She lunged through the grass and snapped at bugs, while he peered past the leaves and clocked something sketchy. With a grin and a victorious catch, she proudly held up the insect in her hand and showed him exactly what she'd grabbed. Naoki crouched low to scan the ground, and the second he did, he realized the whole forest was packed with locust hoppers, swarming everywhere. He leaned in and studied the captured insect up close, and it just sat there, too calm, with zero signs that anything had mutated. Versa stood jammed between towering piles of hoppers, totally baffled by their sheer numbers, like a wild forest migration, but she just couldn't make sense of it. Not as. Naoki froze mid-step, watching the ground and the insects carefully. Then his instincts screamed that something was wildly off. A peaceful forest packed with blooming flowers suddenly turned creepy, like something unnatural was sneaking closer right around the corner. He threw up a quick camp, handed everyone their jobs, then vanished into the danger, promising he'd come back safe with news. Naoki stormed into the government office and reported that the locust hoppers had started acting totally different, like something had flipped a switch. The town leaders demanded answers about who he really was, and Naoki pushed back, explaining the latest analysis and tracing where the infestation might have started. As the night air darkened, an ancient rose bloomed while a dark elf stepped in offering help, but nobody trusted his timing. Nailing his point with confidence, Nasoki showed up with a sealed jar, holding a captured, clean locust hopper untouched by contamination. Even with doubt hanging in the air, that leader stood his ground, declared his worth, proved he was a real adventurer, and handed over the materials he needed. Naoki knew his scruffy look would spark suspicion, but he didn't flinch under their harsh stares. He reassured them, felt the weight lift because at least someone cared, and made it clear that no one should ever have to carry that kind of workload by themselves. With fresh fire in his eyes, the elf seized the lead and invited Naoki to see the coordinated countermeasures with his own eyes. He bellowed that a real, official headquarters was finally formed to slam the locust hopper crisis head-on. Citizens and adventurers leaned in, all ears, as bold plans were unveiled to strike back against the incoming desert demon. Once the first tension finally faded, the staff snapped back to work, and he couldn't help but admire how much respect Riddle's leadership commanded. The project finally went live, and Naoki along with the crew geared up to smash into their very first huge operation. Loud noises outside snapped his focus. He whipped around fast, bracing for whatever came barreling next. A crushing dread smothered the whole land, and the sky darkened hard as if something enormous had just started to wake up and shake the ground with it. Without warning, a brutal storm of dust and raw power slammed into town, wiping out visibility in a blink. As the dust finally settled, Naoki slammed to a stop, his eyes wide, staring at a horrifying scene he never saw coming. A merchant ship plows through violent waves, racing toward the continent for a mission that can't wait. Glass bottles shatter and fly through the town streets as Naoki races toward the public office, where pure chaos explodes outside. Peeking around the corner, he gasps at something wild, a bruise bursting to life right at the bar's entrance. Inside, armored fighters tear into a loud brawl, downing drinks, smashing mugs, and turning every reckless swing into fresh tension. They scoff and insist pest control pays out nothing, mocking Naoki's work, until they realize his methods could crush brute force. Naoki stared at the innkeeper, who warned him that chaos was already brewing from the fresh wave of adventurers who just barged inside. Naoki stumbles through wrecked furniture and shattered glass as he finally uncovers why the riot erupted, the extermination job he requested, only to find it never got paid. Most frustrated adventurers, trapped by brutal storms, snap and bicker over detours, then slam back more alcohol to drown their rage. As the violence spikes higher and higher, Naoki grabs Riddle's attention and shouts at him to stay outside and steer clear of any extra danger. Pure danger, no warning at all. A flying stool slams down near Riddle, narrowly missing him, while the bar erupts in furious chaos. Riddle gets slammed by flying debris, and Naki bolts forward, alarm screaming at the sudden attack from out of nowhere. Even though he's rattled, Riddle gets back on his feet safe and sound. Then they team up and confirm the source truly left those furious adventurers stranded. Shards of broken glass crunching underfoot snap Naoki back to reality. Adventurers don't hesitate when danger shows up. Hands it over and trades a pouch. Inside, a strange flower that locust hoppers can't stand, like their instincts are screaming to flee. Naoki bursts out his discovery. Then they plan to reach out to florists, until Riddle notices something weird lurking behind him. A distant roar rolls through the air as thick smoke climbs up, and urgent footsteps crash in, bringing shocking news of yet another disturbance. Adventurers burst into the shipyard, and the moment the workers refuse to hand over their boats, total chaos detonates. Naoki stays ice calm, convinced the adventurers get what this crisis really demands, even as their wild, short-sighted aggression keeps flaring up with no second thoughts. He whips back to the bar, determined to move before everything spirals out of control again. Clutching his bag tight, Naoki leans in and tells Riddle he's ready to put his personal idea to the test. Naoki strides up to the building by himself, leaving everyone else staring in confusion, desperate to figure out what he's really planning inside. Riddle watches with heavy concern, and finally admits he has zero clue what Naoki's about to pull off. Back at the bar, the chaos explodes. Adventurers snap and swing with reckless fury. The bar owner's face drains with panic when Naoki storms back in. He can't understand why anyone would step straight into that kind of chaos again. After calming the owner down, he leans in and hisses his plan, using a staged act to shut violence down for good. With a smug grin on his face, he tells the bar owner to let him have his table, no strings attached. Naoki doesn't bother explaining. He just inhales slowly, steadies his nerves, and somehow that calmness makes everyone behind him stare in confusion. As tension spikes, the owner freezes with wide eyes, stunned by the sudden heat blasting off Naoki's aura. With one brutal step forward, he hurls his gloved fist down, boom, sending a shockwave rippling across the floor. An explosive blast rips straight through the bar's center wood, and dust and stunned silence crash into the room at once. Outside the bar, a brutal explosion erupts, rattling nearby buildings and jolting everyone watching as their eyes snap straight to the chaos. Naoki stood his ground as dust and wind swirled around him, unleashing a brutal burst of overwhelming power. Adventurers snap to attention, frozen in shock by the brutal silence that hangs inside the crater Naoki's punch just tore open. Eyes sharp on them, he sneers at their terror, mocking them for being smaller than the monsters they're running from. With steel in his voice, Naki declares his resolve, then claims he's F-rank, but the pride in his eyes screams strength he didn't get for free. He earned it with sheer grit. Naki shreds their pride with a cold laugh, taunting them for getting rattled by an F-rank. Brazen words. Seething at the insults, the C-rank adventurers charge ahead, stomping and yelling, while Naoki stays totally calm, offering to fight. The bar owner steps in, daring them to prove they've got the guts real adventurers chase straight into danger. Shocked looks burst across the group as Naoki's icy calm wipes the air clean. No one can speak while the tension keeps climbing. One adventurer snaps back at the moment, shouting that bugs won't scare them, and that nobody should underestimate what they've got. Instead of going and swinging, the adventurers storm out in a rage, swearing they'll prove their worth somewhere else. As they disappear, his expression melts into a grin, pride surging, because he knows he nailed every last part of it. The bar owner, grinning through nerves, shoots Naoki a shaky thumbs up and backs him to the hilt. Outside, Riddle gapes in disbelief as Naoki strolls back in like there's nothing wrong, like he didn't just return from something serious. Words speaking with total calm, he admits he goaded their pride, sparking a fierce competitive spirit instead of crushing it. Naoki pushes for them to head back to the office, smugly certain that the adventurers' drunken arrogance finally got them to cool off. As they step forward, he rattles off his pest control setup, masks, atomizers, and every bit of insecticide gear he's packed. Riddle fires off the question, "How many do we need?" Nahuki shrugs and says it all hinges on how massive the infestation is. Then he starts grilling the big question. Could wiping out the locust hoppers for good even be real? Or is it just wishful thinking? Behind that calm mask, Riddle silently carries the weight of keeping everyone's lives and livelihoods safe. Naoki finally tells the truth, because wiping out a locust swarm with no way it could have ever been done is something history swears was impossible. Riddle reflux. He paused mid-journey and replayed it all, remembering how he finally stumbled into this place to chase peace after years of wandering. The past gives you nothing, no matter how carefully they planned it. Every countermeasure crumbled under Locust's unstoppable, overwhelming destruction. Most victims could only cling to hope, helplessly staring as endless swarms swallowed the sky above them. No mercy. This swarm rips through the world and devours it all, mowing down crops, crushing flowers, and wiping out every last plant in its path. When the swarms roar through, all that's left is dead silence, fields scraped clean, and survivors stumbling through a barren wasteland. Riddle's spirit collapses. He slumps forward in defeat, silently swallowing the same cruel truth Naoki has just laid out. Meanwhile, Naoki sits alone, gripping his Exterminator badge like it's a lifeline, clinging to every last shred of resolve. Moments later, chaos bursts out somewhere else. An explosion rocks the ground as a magical ritual ignites. Even with doubt hanging over them, stubborn hope burns in their eyes, until Naoki stops short and never finishes. Naoki finally breaks the silence, and just when hope is almost gone, he throws out a real shot at a solution. "You don't have to doubt," he reassures Riddle, promising he'll throw everything he's got at this instead of quitting right now. He cranes his head up, snaps into focus again, and starts mapping out the next move with cold, stubborn determination. Naoki stares forward at the grind ahead, but right now, the real job is only just kicking off. They rolled into the peaceful town of Flora, then slowed to a stop, soak up the quiet calm like it was the best break they'd ever earned. A mysterious stranger, swearing he spoke with divine authority, revealed the real reason he'd dragged him here out of nowhere. God handed down a mission to wipe out corrupted heroes, and he warned that Flora's catastrophe was coming fast. Amid those scattered tomes, he dug up ancient ink about a locust swarm, one that always seemed to show up right before disasters. Overcrowding flipped the switch. Now locusts erupted into a violent swarm and are racing to devour everything across the whole region. In his old world, things were bleak, but here, this realm handed him magical tools that could finally wipe out the locust threat. Intrigued by this wild extermination method, he dove into research, hunting down the ingredients and testing how to cast its magic. Even without a real plan in hand, Kamuro Company plunged headfirst into the locust invasion they knew was coming. They pore over razor-detailed terrain maps, plotting the swarm's route before it even moves. Then they brace with defenses ready to snap into place. The crew set up a base right at the desert's edge, waiting to ambush the swarm as it surged forward. At the field lab, Ale brewed up a deadly pesticide with alchemy and glowing magical glyphs. By closely watching how each ingredient reacted, I fine-tuned the mixture's power and locked in the perfect balance. Before he answered, he froze for a breath, wrestling with one terrifying thought. Could this formula really kill those mutated locusts? Kamuro's crew tracked down Ale, and he admitted on the spot that he was testing pesticide development. That mix drove the hoppers away, but it wouldn't end the ingredient tests. New trials still had to happen. To keep the field work safe, she was put on guard duty for Al and ordered to train everyone else. Sudden shouting ripped through the silence, and the two exhausted, panicked figures stumbled backward like they couldn't breathe fast enough. They stumbled back, barely upright, wheezing like the desert stole their breath, sure they'd never make it through another run. They brushed off the warnings, underestimated what the desert would cost them, and ignored every basic survival step they needed before the heat truly crushed them. While they pushed deeper into the ruins, massive poison scorpions exploded into their path and vicious salamanders snapped back, an attack they never saw coming. She didn't pity them one bit. She grinned and teased the two for making it through the desert alive. Even with protests flying, she cracked down hard, restored order, and shoved them right back to work. No delays. While everyone else dragged their feet and ran, she boldly guessed how Nako was doing back in town.